Yeah, surprised they wanted to have dinner at this Thai restaurant tonight. But then another friend of ours said he's been there 2 Tuesdays in a row. Some calls on Tuesday.
Hey, how are you doing?
Time we have dinner, and we go out to check it out.
Hey, I have a cupcake I could
Felipe,
get. No, I really don't.
if you can turn all of the audio down,
Really?
the white dials, both of the white dials. Okay, Ryan Slack,
Here.
Jennifer Riffle. Present. Auden Schendler.
Here.
Bill Infante.
Here.
Katie Schwer. Gary Tenenbaum is on his way, I think. Jackie Whitsitt.
Gary did let us know that he was probably gonna be late because he had his own meeting.
Thank you.
So, first I would like to thank Grassroots TV for being here and for broadcasting our meeting live. People can watch it now or you can watch later at grassrootstv.org. I also want to thank our videographers. Amy, I guess, is not really here, but Felipe is. Hey. And also to let everybody know that tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, there is a mayor's coffee at Starbucks. You're welcome to come and bring your concerns, questions. Usually Ryan Mahoney is there with me. A special note about wildfire restrictions. There's information available at pitcanemergency.com. And it looks like there's also links on the website at Town Hall at basalt.net. Let's see. Oh, what is this, Pamela?
So those were given to us by the Bridge folk. They were little commemorative booklets for each of the council members, thanking them for their assistance during the bridge closures, etc. So they brought one for each of you.
What do these sell for on eBay?
Yeah, what?
Not much.
Exactly. Okay, before we get going too fast here, we had a couple of concerns from council discussion with staff about items regarding a couple of the citizen committees. And that is item 6A on our agenda, which is a post presentation, and also item 7C, which is a BPAC presentation. And one of the things that we realize, and we have been talking about it, and Jennifer has been pushing us on this, is that we have not been giving very clear direction to our citizen committees, and we have had some doing business one way, some doing business another way, and so we would like to ask for a motion to table those two items until after we discuss more in depth at our coming retreat, which is probably looking like first week of August or the last week of July. Just because we don't want to have hurt feelings or give misdirection or have the left hand not know what the right hand is doing here on council. So if there's anyone that would entertain that motion, that would be appreciated.
I would like to motion that we table items 6A and 7C until the council has had their retreat to discuss in greater detail the role and expectations of our citizen councils or citizen groups.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion, yes.
I'm strongly opposed to it. These guys came to meet tonight. We scheduled it. I think we have to have them speak and deal with it.
Anybody else?
Well, I mean, just to express my concern about it is that we continue to push this down the road. It's been on our list for months, and we give potentially conflicting expectations to our groups. And I think it's unfair to them to come into council and have their ideas not accepted fully, and that we as a council need to come together and decide what we want from them. So we're not wasting anyone's time moving forward.
But we're wasting their time right now.
We, my understanding is that we had sent the message to them that we were going to have a motion to table these, and maybe that did or didn't happen. I don't know. It did happen.
Inform them, yeah.
So I think they're aware.
So having attended many post committee meetings, I haven't attended any of the BPAC meetings, but having attended these, I greatly honor and appreciate the time, the thought, the passion, the heart. I mean, these citizen group committees put a lot of time in an awkward part of the day to come to town hall, sit here, move the chairs around, and discuss these items. And I respect that. And on the other hand, I also respect council and what our direction is. And just to what Katie and Jackie were stating is that the left hand and the right hand, there's some disconnect. And that is what my goal and hope is to bridge that so that we can be a great functioning town and we can empower each other and move forward with the best thought out ideas and concepts. And this is where we just need to take a break in the whole system and for council to come together, for us to talk about it, take some time on a work session, retreat, and come together with where it is that we're going so that we can move forward, because we have just been, from a council standpoint, in survival mode. We now are caught up 1 year with town manager, and it's time for us to start digging into the other aspects of what is going to make Basalt thrive.
And in all honesty, there's some of us sitting here who are not prepared to discuss these items, so, I mean, we can waste more time of the citizen committees or
But
less.
it's our job to be prepared to discuss these items. I didn't even know that this was gonna happen, so I was prepared to discuss them. My feeling is, yeah, we need to have better agreement as a council on citizen committees. Let's do that at our retreat, but for the time being, we have something in front of us that says, this committee's worked on this, and we wanna do it, and we should support it or not. And this is bad government to pull this on, it's the first thing I've heard. So, and it's disrespectful to the people who came here to do it and had it on the agenda and were preparing over the last 2 weeks.
Anybody else?
No, I tend to think, frankly, that there's nothing that is proposed in either of the two, either 6A or 7C, that we can't discuss tonight. I agree that we need to discuss the framework, the terms, the mandates, the authorities of all of our committees at a retreat, but I don't see that either of these two issues necessarily goes against that. I also don't think it's necessarily a good idea to kick these down, kick the can down the road when these are fairly specific issues that we can decide on.
I agree, let's just get it done.
Okay, well, I will go ahead, we have a motion and a second, so I'll go ahead and call the question. The motion was to table these till after the retreat. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay. Okay, then we are gonna talk about them, because the motion failed, so. So our next item is the consent agenda, which is the minutes from June 12th, and a continuance to July 10th of a public hearing on a new hotel and restaurant liquor license for Wiener Stube. Darn it. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Great, thank you. At this point in time, we will ask the public if they have any comments regarding anything that's not on the agenda. We would ask that the public limit comments to 3 minutes and address your comments directly to the mayor. Identify yourself by name and address when making comments. Comments should be courteous, civil, and constructive, and town council will make no decision nor take action except to direct the town manager. So if you have any comments, please come up to a microphone so we can hear you. So these are for comments, items not on the agenda. Okay, hearing none, we will move on. We always love to hear any positive comments about what's happening in the town of Basalt, or things that are going on, or just life in general in Basalt. Does anybody have anything about that?
Actually, I do.
Oh, good.
I'm Lynn Minister of the Talk About Gallery, and I
There's no mic there, Lynn. Could I ask you to?
Oh, never
Oh, there we
mind.
go. There we go.
Use that next one, Susan, yeah, thanks.
Sorry, dear.
Okay, I had dinner with some friends from Chicago last night, and we walked down the river, and we trespassed on the Roaring Fork Conservancy building, and they were absolutely astonished at how beautiful it was, and how pretty it was, and how wonderful it was, and their comment was, please don't mess it up with lots of stuff. That, of course, doesn't apply to sculptures.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. Actually, well, I'll save mine. I'll save mine, but I have a similar comment that I got from a citizen. So mayor and council reports and/or comments. I have one really quick. Today is Ryan Mahoney's first anniversary with the town. And, go ahead. And I think he kind of spaced it out, but I stopped into his office today and just said, oh my God, I can't believe it's been a year, but I just want to compliment Ryan on the fact that he hit the ground running. He really didn't know anyone here or anything that we were doing, and I mean, I have to say, he knows almost everything. I'm very, very happy to be associated with Ryan, and we had kind of sent emails out to everybody to see if anyone else had any congratulatory remarks for Ryan. Auden?
Sure, yeah. I mean, first off, you've been here a year, which is a major accomplishment for us and for you. But you're a great fit here in the community. You're biking all over the place. Your family's playing sports, and you're doing a great job, as you saw in your review, and it's awesome. And it feels like many things have happened in the town to get us on track, and you're the most important piece. But we've knocked out a lot of things in the last, 6 months to a year, and it's great. So congrats.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
This isn't a formal review, but if anyone else has anything to say, that's wonderful.
I just want to reflect the level of professionalism within the entire town of Basalt staff has come up, and it really shows, and it's having everyone shine at what they're so good at. And so, thank you for bringing that. Yeah.
Okay, going.
Whoops.
Bill?
For general comments, I am deeply indebted to Ryan for having schooled me in these early days of my counselorship. So thank you very much for escorting me to the training down in Dillon, for having provided wonderful insights and valued counsel, and I look forward to working with you over the next 4 years.
Thanks.
You're very welcome.
Any speeches about your first year? Okay, never mind. Thanks, everybody. Okay, our next item is the manager's report. Ryan.
Yeah.
Oh,
so-
wait a minute. There might be other reports and comments from elected officials. Yes.
Are you going to talk about this Urban Land Institute piece? Or
I was, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Bill, did you have something as well?
Yeah, just a point or two on a couple things that I would love to ask if we could organize. Kind of committed to protecting the fiduciary responsibility that we have to the taxpayers. So would like to strongly encourage that we do convene a finance committee meeting on July 13th as scheduled. But I would also, since we're kind of halfway through the year right now, I'd love to invite the Basalt Chamber of Commerce in to do a working session with us, perhaps at the next meeting, to explain what their strategy is, what their marketing plan is, what their kind of goals and plan for 2018 is, since we are investing a fairly significant sum of taxpayer money in the Basalt Chamber of Commerce. And it's kind of for that same reason that I am actually interested, as was Auden, to discuss BPAC, because we are halfway through the year. They've got $60,000 in grant money plus the other RETA funds, and frankly, I think it's time to get that moving. And if we were not to discuss BPAC today, that would imply that we might not discuss BPAC until September, and that's just too late. There's too much taxpayer money that has been committed, and so those are the three items that I would love to, or the 3 points I would love to make, 2 scheduling items that I would love to request.
Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome.
Mayor?
So of the 3, excuse me if I can clarify, you talked about the finance committee, and just one quick correction, July 11th, I think is the
sorry.
date. Is that that's a Wednesday, I
Yeah,
think.
thank you.
Yeah.
And then
Is that what
Basalt
you said?
Chamber, I heard that, and then
Yeah.
is the third,
The third one is just another point why I think it's important to discuss BPAC tonight.
oh, got it, okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a real quick thing.
Yes, sir.
So earlier, several of us were trying to park our bikes just right out here at the bike racks. And right now we just have half a rack. If we could push it out, and then we could have a full bike rack, or realign it, just tilt it. Because right now we really only have parking for 3 bikes.
Sure.
It's really too heavy, otherwise we.
That seemed
problem.
really easy.
That's an easy one.
And with tomorrow being Bike to Work Day, it would be very apt.
Okay. Did you have anything? Thank you. Okay, now, how about Ryan Mahoney, manager's report?
Yeah, so a couple quick things for you. So I got from Auden an email regarding a training that's coming up. It's a one-day workshop. It is in Denver. It's on the 26th of July, so there's a little bit of time left. But it's specifically focused toward elected officials. And the Urban Land Institute puts it on, and it's a case study that focuses on urban redevelopment, and so somewhat apropos for the town and some of our master planning. And it's on Thursday the 26th, so it's a full day. And essentially, what it is, it's a case study where you actually participate in this sort of 3D modeling game-like exercise for figuring out a little deeper what your roles as elected officials are in the development process. And I think you get to, rub elbows with other elected officials, and so there's opportunity to talk and learn from their experiences. So if anybody's interested in that, I can pass along the information and then just let me know, and we can, start organizing that. So the 26th, I'm not sure which day. Oh, it's a Thursday, excuse me. It's a Thursday, so.
Could you shoot that out to us on
I will,
email?
yeah.
So we don't
Absolutely.
bog down here.
So it sounds like an interesting opportunity, and I've been a member over the years of Urban Land Institute, and I think they do a really great job at providing instruction and insight for the land development and planning process. The second thing I want to let you know, and this is general information, that on Thursday last week, the Supreme Court decided in favor, a 5-4 decision in a case that was called South Dakota versus Wayfair, that concluded that state and local governments can require remote retailers to remit sales tax. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of leaning on the Colorado Municipal League to be able to help us out with this. This wouldn't be something we go alone. But nonetheless, I just wanted to put that on your radar, and I'll keep you all posted. But it could level the playing field for our Main Street businesses, as well as collect on some of the leakage that we get through online sales. So that was good news. And a final thing to leave you guys with. I could have said this during the happy moments, but last night I was coming home from a bike ride, and it was about 9 o'clock or so, and stopped over into the food garden, and there are big fat currants on one of the bushes in the edible garden, and so I sat there and grazed for a few minutes.
You and the bears.
Ended up walking around, and all of the plants and the trees that are over in there are really coming in to their own, and we really do have a pretty incredible opportunity there. And I've had feedback, and actually this summer have been working with public works staff because I think it needs some TLC. But I wanted to leave you with the fact that the bones of that place I think are pretty incredible. And part of our status as an arboretum is due to the fact that we have this edible garden over there. So maintaining that and being able to maintain that status, I think, is pretty important. And so just know that we as staff are working hard to try to make some improvements over there, and it'll be hopefully more to come in the future to really make it a showcase. So thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. Speaking of happy moments and mayor council comments, I meant to chime in after Lynn said that. Catherine Traeger, who was a Glenwood Springs councilwoman, now works for Pitkin County, and I wandered in there for whatever reason. Oh, I think it was the grand opening of the affordable housing. And she pulled me aside to specifically point out that she can't believe how beautiful our gardens are and our roundabouts and all those things that, over the many years have really built up to be such a beautiful asset for Basalt, and, you know, I think we take it for granted when we drive by them every day, but they are gorgeous. Okay. Our first presentation is updates in park donation policies, and what staff person? Okay.
Watkins is taking the lead, but we need to do a timeout here just to move some more chairs up here for the post committee. So it's a kind of a VOC, I think. Bring your own chair. And, you know, we did send out a notice to the post members that it was likely that we were going to be continued. But we have 3 members of post here today. You know, Watkins Folkray, our staff member, and we have Paul Hiltz and Cindy Bruce and Glenn Drubin that are here from post to discuss this and then any other updates on post that you guys have questions about. So Watkins, do you want to start and then?
Yeah, so we're here to talk about donations of various things. We're talking about donations of park furniture like benches, we're talking about trees or other kind of plant donations, and also about public art donations. These are all can be good things. You know, they sound great. Someone wants to give us something. That sounds good. But that also brings up questions that we've found. You know, it involves maintenance because you have to take care of what we have. We have to look at things like the cohesiveness of the look throughout town, and then things like the satisfaction to people of Basalt, and does town council want to have these things that someone's willing to donate to us. So it's an issue that we think is worth discussing with you all. We want to have some kind of clear policies because we want to get ahead of this issue. We haven't, to this date, been really flooded with donations. We have had some requests. People want to give us some things. But we want to get ahead of it so that we have policies in place so we can give people clear answers and so that everyone can be happy with the result. So just as kind of history in Basalt, as far as staff knows, I guess Basalt's kind of practice has been, we'll say, casual about accepting donations. We do have some donated benches, you know, kind of in various states of you know, maintenance. But we're proposing some new policies here today, Post is, and it's kind of different actually. We've done some research from other towns to see what other places do. But what Post is proposing today is that we do not accept donations of physical things like benches and artwork and trees, but instead try to funnel those donations into like park beautification funds, more general restricted funds that would go toward maintenance, go toward acquiring new park furniture and things like that. And so in that way, people would be able to donate to Basalt and donate to our parks, and would be recognized for that in some way, which we'll get into. But we wouldn't be obligated to accept something that we don't really want if that were to happen. So the concept that Post has come up with is we're calling right now the Giving Garden. And I was wondering, Cindy, do you want to kind of describe how we got there and what the idea of the Giving Garden is?
Sure, although I think Paul is going to be the lead on this, so if you want to jump in.
I'll take the ball. All right. Well, I'll try to be brief. And first of all, thank you for entertaining us tonight. And just to divert a second, I think it is a great idea when you do have your board retreat to come up with some type of a policy or approach to dealing with citizen boards, because sometimes we do feel like we're working in a vacuum. But thank you for offering us the opportunity. And I will say that Jennifer has sat in on several of our meetings, and it has been helpful. So we're just here basically tonight to get a feel from the board as to whether you want to proceed with something like this, to have a policy for donations, and specifically for what's being called the Giving Garden at this time. And we're trying to be proactive rather than reactive, because Watkins has done some research with Aspen and Glenwood as to the problems that they've encountered in the past with donations and parks and art that's being proposed for various parks. And of course, we have a great opportunity coming up with the further development of the park here. And it's something that we felt that you would want to get ahead of, instead of having people showing up at every council meeting saying, well, I've got a donation of a bronze statue, and I'd like you to take it and stick it in the park over here.
We understand that is how it works in Aspen, at least sometimes.
Yeah. So you have an opportunity to get ahead of the curve on this, and not being experts on this, we got input from some other towns. We also met with members of BPAC who had some great ideas. We have a process worked out that would include public input. So basically what we're looking for here is just some direction, if you'd like us to move forward with this and present you with a proposed policy for the future, because it is going to be something as soon as that park is finished over here that you'll have to deal with either on a regular basis at council meetings or through various committees.
First, just to say, I mean, I just want to throw in a comment. I think that you have hit on a problem that we definitely have. I personally have had at least a half a dozen or a dozen people come to me and say, can I do this for my dead person or dead dog or, you know, what, I mean, it's endless. So this is definitely an issue that we need to take by the horns, because I also talked to Gary. Gary's not here yet, but Picken County Parks and Open Space, he said they would have the Rio Grande Trail lined with benches if there was not a policy. So I definitely appreciate the fact that you've taken this on for discussion, and I think this is something that we will definitely dig into at our retreat, because there's a million different ways to do it, quite honestly. And Ryan and I have talked about a few of those ways, but you know, we're probably not going to make that decision right now, or suggest that you even move forward on it till we kind of get our feet wet on that issue and see what direction we're thinking. But did you have anything more on that, Ryan?
No, I mean, I think we talked about some ideas that, you know, one of the things that I have shared with you is I think that Steamboat Springs went through a similar gyration where they had several pieces of donated art that they, you know, had taken on and placed in the public realm, and it turns out that it was in an area that it started to degrade the art, and they were left without the expertise and understanding or endowment to be able to maintain them properly. And so they took those steps to get out ahead of it. So when I heard about you know, what this group was working on, I thought that it was you know, a good idea to once again not be reactionary and be a little more proactive about how we might pursue this. So you know, at council's direction, if it's something we you know, hit the ground with in earnest after a retreat, that's great. But you know, certainly love to hear some input from all of you.
Anybody? Katie, do you have your pencil
Sure.
up?
Yeah.
Okay.
I definitely agree that I support the proactive nature of this, and that, yeah, the uncomfortable situation that we could get in, avoiding that with this resolution, but like Jackie said, vetting things further at our staff retreat. I guess the one thing that to me is a big question is how Post would work with BPAC when there are offers of art, or the contemplation, not necessarily of offers, but the contemplation of putting art or statues or monuments, like how these two groups are going to work together to determine how that would happen.
Yeah,
All the
that's a
Lego
great
Olympiad.
question. It's one I knew would come up. Our meeting with BPAC members was really very helpful. They had a lot of great ideas on how to proceed with this and include the community in the decision-making process in building this policy. But not once did they ever try to promote a particular approach or, by the way, we've got 4 statues we'd like placed here. It was just totally, this is how you can do it. And one of their members recently went to a conference where this was discussed in several forums, so it's something that's happening all over the state. And so they never were pushing a personal or private agenda. It was just helping us, because we're not experts in this, to come to the best conclusion for the town. And that is something, I have to tell you, that people on the Post, I don't think there are any members who have a personal agenda. So they're very objective and they're very circumspect about people coming with personal agendas. So, but that's a great question.
Glenn, did you have your hand up?
You pretty much nailed it.
Okay, yes, Katie.
And just one more thing. Our riverfront parcels are so spectacular, but I guess what I would also like to convey is that the focal point be the natural world and how spectacular it is, that we are the confluence of two spectacular rivers, and that's our focus, because that's what makes us so incredibly special and unique, and that we're not placing items that are distracting from, something that could be placed anywhere in the world, versus we're pretty darn unique.
Yeah.
And
So,
that was one of the big things that, like, with BPAC and with Post, the reason that they kind of have to team on this item is, like, obviously the art donation's probably going to go through BPAC, but where it's going to be placed. Is it going to be put in an open space within the town? How is that decision made? So that is a lot of the reason that they have to be worked together.
Yeah. We have some work to do on this, don't we? Yeah, Bill?
Thank you very much for spearheading the initiative. I think it's really commendable, and we do need policies on public art. I had questions, however, about kind of the concept of giving garden and the broader concept of art in public places. And the resolution begins, with a statement that says the town of Basalt does not accept donations of park furniture, trees, or public art pieces. That, I think, is wrong-headed. We should accept contributions of park benches, maybe not trees for other reasons, or horticultural elements for other reasons, but public art pieces, absolutely, positively. I think that is.
And Post never once said that we wouldn't accept public art. Like, if you continue reading, it's going to say that if you do accept public art,
Right.
probably should be put in Midland Park because it's more of a better venue for it.
Well, and I also think that would be
If everybody could just ask for the floor.
Yeah. And I also think that it would be misguided to restrict where public art could be placed. I think it should be placed wherever it can fit, wherever it's appropriate. And so having guidelines for what can be placed and where it can be placed and what it should complement or not is completely appropriate. But I would hate to reduce or remove the discretion of Post or BPAC or Town Council to place public art in an appropriate place if it were in fact offered. So I would resist that. However, having guidelines for park benches, I totally get the idea that there's a bench crisis and benches are in disrepair and benches are of inconsistent architectural form. I would encourage Post to begin as soon as possible defining guidelines for what's an appropriate bench. And then we don't have to have this discussion, because I don't think it is the role and responsibility of Town Council to opine on benches, frankly. But scrolling down, the notion of having a giving garden as a discrete and delimited area, I think has to be addressed separately, since you're requesting $200,000 for that purpose. So that's a separate budgetary item, a separate item that involves an appropriation. It could be reasonable, it could be great, but I would hate to have a giving garden as the exclusive domain or repository for any public art. That wouldn't make any sense to me. And so I would encourage you to flesh out the policy. We will want to define the relative or respective roles and responsibilities of BPAC and Post. I do not think it is Post's responsibility to be the arbiter of what constitutes public art. That's a BPAC function, and so if BPAC receives a contribution or has a thought for the appropriation of its own funds for public art, then it would be the responsibility of Post to accommodate those contributions if and when possible. But I would preserve the relative responsibilities, authorities, and mandates of the two committees, but encourage you very strongly to work together to find ways to make Basalt an art welcoming, an art appropriate, an art identified community in the Mid-Valley.
Cindy?
I think that they maybe got a little bit misconstrued. They are totally different. One, Post is one thing, BPAC is a different thing.
No, I understand that.
So yeah, the Giving Garden is Post's idea of trying to start this conversation. And we got some input from BPAC. But as far as accepting public art, the Giving Garden really wouldn't have much to do with that piece. The idea of the Giving Garden is more of a contemplative area and might have little or nothing to do with any public art.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
that's kind of really has nothing to do with the pieces of public art, perhaps.
Paul?
So.
Bill, your comments are well spoken, well taken. And that's the gist of where we would like to go with this, is that we've now outlined a public process for creating that policy. We're not locked into any particular policy. We're about creating a process to develop a policy. So those are all valid points. And I can tell you there are some on the other side of that. But that's part of the public process to get to a policy that the town can live with.
So thank you for being here and for the work you do. And this meeting is part of that effort that you describe of trying to get a better understanding of what you do and have us a better sense of what we're looking for and so forth. So this is great. And I don't mean to be too crotchety tonight, but I don't want to spend the retreat working on this policy. To any of you? You know, like, we don't have time, we'll have 4 or 5 hours. So would be happy to deputize you to say, hey, flesh this out further, or if this is it, great, let's talk about it. And then we could say, go for it, or not. One more thought, and then, but my one question is, what if someone wanted to give you something really awesome? You know, and you have a policy that says, no, we don't take it. There's gotta, I think, some discretion in terms of, oh, we'll take that, whatever.
So like, I guess one person's definition of awesome versus another person's definition of awesome is very, very different.
Yeah.
So, you know, how as a community do you get something that people can have a venue to say, hey, I do want to donate to Basalt and Basalt Parks? I mean, really our main objective was creating a mechanism that here's how you do it.
Right,
You
and
know, and that's the biggest thing.
isn't it that people have junk they want to get rid of versus make a contribution? I mean, that's my only concern, is being a guy who tries to get rid of junk. It would be, here's a thing that I think is valuable and you don't, and then you say, no, give us $500, and I'm like, nah, I just wanted to get rid of this junk.
Right. Well, I think that this is, go ahead, Jen.
So having sat in on the post meetings and hearing this evolve and being able to visualize what the Giving Garden looks like, this group of citizens has really gone much further than what it shows in our packet. There have been idea boards, there's imagery, there has been pricing for how much a plaque would be. I mean, there's a lot of time that's gone into this, and I really respect that. And for the direction of where to go, I really agree with the concept of coming up with a policy, and I feel that you are on the right path, you as a group, of defining this is how we accept donations. And what it really comes down to, the problem that they were faced with, or the pearl or the seed, was remembrance is a big part of what the town of Basalt gets approached by, is my father passed and I'd like to plant 2 trees in the river park so that I can see them. And what the reality is that eventually the trees are going to get diseased, or development's going to occur, or who knows what. And this is that reverse thinking of, okay, how do we engineer this for vitality, success, and good jive with the town? And so it really, It sounds stark to say, no, we will not accept public art as a remembrance. And this is the key thing, is to separate the two. That the what's it, the Giving Garden? The Giving Garden is a place where if you don't have your awesome piece of junk that has value, but you have money that you want to put towards something, this is a place that you can put it. It's structured, this is defined, and it will withstand, and the town can maintain it. And I think that is the key thing from Post's perspective and from my perspective that I reflect back, and I really appreciate the town going in this direction, is really paying attention to what can we maintain? What can our limited staff afford to maintain and have the time to maintain? And that's what we really need to keep in mind and the forefront. Sure, we could have a 35-foot fly fisherman sculpture, but how are we going to clean the bird poop off of his head? You know, we're going to have to rent a crane and yada, yada, yada. So we need to come up with a policy that defines, and as well, if we want to go an Eagle County route, also is legally protective of the town. So that tree dies, and then the citizen could come and say, hey, you're liable for killing the tree. Why didn't you maintain it? Or the piece of art got vandalized, yada, yada, yada. There's these nightmares from everywhere. So this is what it's coming down to, is this direction. And I'm on board with it. When it comes to the $200,000 price tag for the Giving Garden, like we did in the beginning of the meeting, I'm not putting this out to vote, but just an idea. What if we put the $60,000 from BPAC's public art towards the Giving Garden? Just putting out ideas, spaghetti on the wall. But hey, that's my commentary.
Well, I would like to kind of circle the wagons on this a little bit and just express for all of us how much we appreciate this, and I think you are going to end up with this back in your plate again, just to make sure the fellows down here don't think that we are going to write the policy. But I think what we are going to be talking about in the retreat is not Post or BPAC or anyone, but the fact that we as a council have not been very good at giving direction to our citizen groups about, do you meet all the time? Do we send you something to fix for us? I mean, we haven't been clear, so that's really going to be what we spend our time in the retreat, is to actually come up with how should the citizen committees function, and how do we make sure that we are giving clear direction and getting feedback, get the loop going a little bit better. Yeah, Glenn.
Like, being new to Post, I haven't been on but for maybe 2 months now. That is one thing that I would like to see, is it's like, what do you guys want us to do?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
What's your vision for what Post accomplished?
So
If we have that given direction, that definitely helps.
You're so needy.
Yes.
So I'm gonna cut this off pretty quick. Do you have one last burning?
I do have a comment, because, I mean, Jen, I understand what you're saying about needing to manage and maintain whatever bequest is made. And I think that needs to be part of the policy. If you are going to bequeath a tree, then you need to provide for its upkeep. If you're going to bequeath a statue that is in some way perishable, then you must provide for its upkeep, for its placement and location. But I think it becomes extremely perilous if we begin defining what people can remember and what they can't. If someone wants to remember a grand aunt or the veterans of the Mexican-American War, that is their prerogative to remember whatever they want. We may evaluate their bequest based upon its aesthetic or other values. But if I want to remember Mayor Whitsitt, it is not for Post to tell me that I can't remember Mayor Whitsitt with a contribution, as Auden said, of a piece by Rodin or Giacometti. I would love to see a sculpture garden, frankly, on the Pan and Fork property, that kids could walk around and wonder and see international artists, local artists, Colorado State artists. I think it would be a huge error to deprive them of that cultural excitement, discovery, to to restrict the placement, type, or remembrance of art that we place.
One more comment.
Okay, two more.
I just have to say that what you're hitting on is actually what is such a significant argument that's happening in the southeast. I mean, we're perhaps with you saying absolutely no guidance on what can be placed in our public space creates the potential problem that they are now facing in certain communities. So I think that Post has to contemplate, or we as council need to contemplate reasonable expectations for donations. And so I think that we just need to carry the conversation perhaps to
I mean, I'm not familiar
Bill,
with,
well, you, then you.
Okay, yeah, I mean, Aspen Skiing Company has the same problem. I didn't realize this was specifically about, hey, memorials, or a big chunk of it is. We don't do any because the whole mountain would be covered. So you could just blanket reject it all. My only issue here tonight is these guys are coming for direction, and I think our direction ought to be, this seems pretty good. You're addressing a key issue. Let's say, I'd say, if this is a policy that is going to be finalized, let's have this as something we consider. In other words, let's give them direction to go forward with it,
with what?
Brian.
with what they've proposed.
With the Giving Garden.
Yeah, as a solution to this, and then we can.
'Cause
Excuse me, Ryan's on.
Just one quick thought on the donation of benches. Something that they do in Central Park is you can obviously sponsor a bench. I don't know if we're doing that as a town, but that's a great way to offer to the person, hey, you know, we have one set of benches that we have throughout our town to make easy maintenance, but you can put a plaque on it and it's X number of dollars, and that helps pay towards our new benches. We have one standard, and that's a great way for people to be able to remember and go sit on the bench and reflect about the relative or pet or Civil War.
One more, and then we're gonna wrap it up.
Yeah, I want to help you finish this up, really, because all these comments are great. They're really part of what we foresee being the public process to come to this conclusion on what kind of policy you want to have. So alls we really need is, do you want us to proceed with a process, a public process, where everyone's thoughts and comments will be part of that, and go from there?
Personally, I would prefer that the council group on this a little bit, because like I said, I don't want to create the policy right now, which is kind of going that direction. But I think that Ryan and I have come up with ideas, and there are other ideas out there. Some of those ideas are just plain old. We want to do this particular thing. I mean, my example that I always give is the bricks in Coors Field leading up to the deal. Coors Field designed that, and then they said, you want to memorialize somebody? Give me $500 for a brick. But the design was set. So we as a council have not decided and are not going to decide in the next 37 seconds, I don't believe, how this direction is going to go. So if you could give us a little bit of time, I think we will cut you loose. Did you have something, Ryan?
No, Mayor.
Oh, you looked like something was happening over there.
No.
Jackie?
Yeah.
But I would say, look, time is short. It's hard to get anything done in government. Let them pursue the process that would get that input from us and others. It's going to take a while anyway, and then at least we'll be further down the road. I don't want to just stop it. Seems like they're done a lot of work already.
Motion?
I make a motion that we support, or that you guys go forward with a public process to get feedback on your proposal.
I second.
I would second that, but I would also make a motion that we empower you.
Wait a minute, there's a motion on the floor, Bill.
Okay. I'll second his
And
motion
there-
for the Giving
there's-
Garden.
And Ryan already seconded it. Is there further discussion?
My further discussion would be that if we move forward with this motion, that Post understands clearly that we're having this major council contemplation about what we expect from our citizen committees so that we can become more effective, more efficient, and better use of everyone's time. And that's gonna come out in July, August.
Is that a friendly amendment or just a commentary? How would
That's
we-
a friendly amendment.
Okay, that what? So that, since it's my amendment,
No,
to
it's
say
your
that.
motion. My amendment is that that we are under the understanding that moving forward it's going to be influenced by our council contemplation in July, August.
Jeff, wait a minute.
Mayor, what I heard was a motion to directing Post to continue fleshing out its policies, and a second to that. And Katie, what you're saying is just kind of coloring the situation. I don't know that that's an actual, needs to be in the form of an amendment to that motion. And so the purpose of this item on the agenda is to provide general direction as to them as to where to go from here. And so there's no real formal action being taken. This is just kind of direction for them as to where to go.
So I said continue the public
Okay.
process, and I think you're saying that includes us, isn't it?
Right, and that something is going to come out of our council retreat, because we've been talking about this for over a year, and that will influence next steps for Post.
So are you okay with the as is? That includes.
Well, do we even need a motion?
No, we don't.
Because
That's what I want to get to, is
No.
this is
Hold on,
not,
Jen.
this is not a council action. This is just a presentation. There's no motion. It's just the action of council providing direction.
There was a motion and there was a second. So, here's the
Can-
deal. I'm gonna vote no on this motion because I don't feel like we are ready. I think we're rushing this big time, and I think what may come out of the retreat may reverse what this motion is saying, and I don't want that to happen. So, I'm gonna vote no. It's not because I don't like your idea. I think there are other ideas, and if we just flesh it out with just this idea, let's just wait. I mean, we're gonna vote, and it's gonna win or it's gonna lose. So,
And Mayor, if I may just add one more thing, although this is just scheduled for general discussion and direction, because there's kind of conflicting viewpoints as to what that direction is, it's okay to make a motion as to what that direction should be. So where we're at in the process is okay.
so we have a motion, we have a second, additional,
My comment is also related to the availability of our time in early August, hopefully, when we will meet. We're not gonna have 5 hours to discuss post policy. What I would love to suggest is that you guys develop these policies for us to review, evaluate, comment on when we get together in early August, so that we're not beginning from anew. Commit something to paper, your policy on a giving garden, your policy on public arts, your policy on whatever, park benches, and then we can respond to that. And this policy can be 3 pages. It doesn't have to be a tome.
okay,
But
Bill, can I interrupt you? There is a motion and a second on the floor with it's a clear motion of what was asked for, so you are not giving individual direction to these people. You can't do that. We have a motion and a second. And that, do you want to restate your motion?
yeah, I
on-
didn't understand the motion, frankly.
My motion is that you go forward and continue the public process to develop this policy.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second. All in favor of Auden's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion fails. So, we're good. We want you to do this. We want you to do this after we clarify our thoughts a little bit more, so that we don't scoop it back in and start over. I don't want to do that to you. So, thank you for your time. I think your idea is well worth considering, and there will be some other ideas that you bring to us too.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Our next item is public hearing and second reading of Ordinance 11, an ordinance of the town amending Chapter 18, building regulations of the municipal code of the town of Basalt regarding sustainable building regulations and miscellaneous cleanup items, and amending the town's fee schedule. Sarah, you're back.
Hi.
Everybody's
Welcome,
back.
Mayor. Thank you very much. Just to introduce our group again, Sarah Nadelny with the Town's Planning Department. We have Jeff Dickinson with Biospace Inc. We have Amanda Poindexter with Full Circle Construction Services, and Sarah Gruen with CORE. And this is our team, part of our team. These are all leaders in green building, energy, conservation, and sustainability fields. And just, I know you've seen us, most of you have seen us quite a few times, and, love us for that. But just going to give you a quick recap as to why we're here and what we're doing today. Again, we're a team of staff, Basalt Green Team, and consultants that are here to update the town's sustainable building regulations. The intent of our update is to align the code with the adopted International Energy Conservation Code, in effect, that is the 2015 code, and as well as to elevate the sustainable building regulations over those minimum IECC requirements, and to provide a tangible path to reducing greenhouse gas emissions from buildings, which we have found to be the #1 contributor to greenhouse gases in the town of Basalt community. And it's also our amendments that we're proposing today are in line with the climate action plan for the Eagle County community. So council did approve this upon first reading, and we're here for second reading today of the ordinance. And the second page of the packet.
Sarah, could you just remind really quick? I know you're gonna hit this.
Oh, absolutely, sorry.
What has changed from first to this one? When you get to that point?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, second page of the packet for tonight's item does provide a summary of the major changes that you've seen, and this was also in the packet at first reading. And since first reading, thank you for asking, Madam Mayor, what has changed since first reading? The attorney has completed his review of the ordinance and approved this with some minor non-substantive changes. So mostly language, grammar, things that might read a little bit better. And council, you did provide some feedback and asked for some clarification on certain points at first reading. And the responses have been included within the packet on page 3. Amanda here is prepared to go through to highlight the major changes on those points. And we'd like to just also ask for if you have any more questions or would like some further clarification on the sustainable building regulations that would promote going forward and adopting this ordinance. Okay. So I'll turn it over to Amanda unless everyone is good with that, but
go ahead.
Here to speak to that.
All right.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. We haven't really changed too much, but I will briefly go through this and just kind of tell you what we've clarified and discussed further. You wanted to know how the distance was measured from bus stops and bike share facilities, and we are taking the most direct pedestrian route with a sidewalk or improved trail to the bus stop, bike share facilities, and we included that language in the ordinance. We also had a suggestion to include the training opportunities on the permit cards when we give those out. We talked to Jim Wilson and he stated there's really not room on the card, but we will just, include this as a handout for that.
So I'll put it on our website.
Yes, it'll be on the website. Auden has stated that perhaps a larger rebate should be given for people pursuing a LEED Gold certification or Zero Energy Ready. We discussed this with our town manager and, maybe not in favor, but perhaps we'll get this program going and see, if there's funds available elsewhere or in the future. So I don't know, Ryan, did you want to speak on that at all?
Yeah, my point on that is that we use, the funds that we get for operating, and, we've this year already, though it wasn't a tremendous amount, but with the cigarette tax, we had $16,000 cut from our general fund. And if we, kind of continue to do that, we're doing that at the same time increasing our service level. And so it would be my preference to see what kind of demand there is initially, and then we can reassess. One of the other recommendations that had come out before from one of the council members was that perhaps we need to look at our building fees generally. They're sort of low for the region, so I think you're getting a break in a sense there, and I don't venture to guess exactly how they compare to some of our neighboring communities right at this moment. But I would just make that recommendation that we go at this with a little care and kind of see, and we can flesh it out when we see the program after a year or so. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Ryan.
I did have a question on
Yes.
that, and I think it's great to use economics to incentivize certain behaviors that we want to encourage or discourage. But if we want to encourage sustainable building practices, it seemed appropriate and reasonable to use the incentive of a 25% reduction in permit fees. The question that I had was, what are we talking about in dollars and cents? You know, is this going to be a $200 hit, a $2,500 hit, a $25,000 hit to the budget if, in fact, we were to move forward on this? How many buildings do you expect are going to move down this pipe that would then be eligible? You know, is there any estimate, or are we kind of guessing?
Do you wanna, I don't have a great estimate of what it is. It depends on which the buildings are, their size, and that's why I kind of wanted to get some of that, empirical data first before we can, really make that better assessment on who might be. It's a chicken and egg thing a little bit, because it's like, well, is 25 not enough? And would we have more if it was 50? But, I still would argue that, we have good policies in place now for green building and have been pushing them. So instead of going in headlong, it's easy to incrementally increase them. It's not so easy to roll them back. So that was the logic.
But if we can look at kind of the magnitude of the gain or loss and what this might do to incentivize construction, somewhere between 0 and 100% rollback is probably what we're going to agree on, and something would be appropriate. The level is going to be left to you to assess the empiric data.
Right, and,
Yeah, I actually, when we were talking about, we didn't put it in the packet, but we thought actually instead of just a percentage that it would automatically apply, we were thinking about more in terms of, can we have a grant program that we actually consider in part of the budget? That way we'd actually have a set amount of money rather than a percentage, and we could incentivize people to come in with gold, not unlike Habitat for Humanity kind of asking us, we would like to have some money to subsidize going with a different electrical system that may be more direct, because you could control it better, rather than just a straight percentage, because we don't know in any one year. That's one of the tricks in the building permit process, our budgeting process, is how much money can we even guess that we're going to come in with building permit fees, because one year you get a lot, one building in Willistown Center is quite a bit of money, and the next year you don't. So it might be more dependable if we could give particular incentives. We're having a meeting with CORE, kind of set up to see what the next big projects. It's been a discussion kind of with the green team, what should be the next town big project, and CORE wants to have some discussions with us. So I think there might be another way than trying to try to estimate a number that's really hard to estimate, because you aren't able to kind of project what you're going to come up with. We haven't had very many gold level LEED buildings. So what we're hoping is in the single family with the, because we're now offering that we might see some, but I think there might be another way to incentivize it besides just the straight percentage with a cap, which is what this ordinance has.
so it's the 25% rebate, but it's capped at 5,000.
Jennifer?
I was totally on board with Susan, and that's what I was going to bring up is CORE, exactly doing rebates like that. And they're phenomenal, it works great, it doesn't impact the town's budgetary, it's much more predictable, etc. And then as well, just the concept that if we reduce the building rates, yes, we are incentivizing, but also those individuals or organizations are going to be doing this anyways, because it's something on the radar, something that's important to them, and they are going to be reaping savings in their energy costs and the long-term maintenance.
Okay.
So,
Okay, keep going.
And just as a heads up, CORE does have a grant for new home construction, and as Susan mentioned, we'll be talking about that in the coming weeks.
Okay, next.
Awesome. All right, so two more. Yeah, you guys had asked how our fee structure is comparable with other communities. We have set up, it's a 15 cent per square foot per point that you are deficient on the threshold. And the only community we can really kind of compare it to is Carbondale, because they're on a similar system, and they have a per point rate that they charge you. So that rate increases as the houses get larger. And ours is more, the rate stays the same, but our thresholds are changing. So it's slightly comparable, but it is a little bit more. But also that's, we're just trying to incentivize sustainable building and reaping in the benefits in the long term. And lastly, we had asked specifically, what if you're doing a remodel plus an addition and how that applies to the point system. And we have kind of reworded that. This is kind of the only change we've made. We reworded a line item in our table that says, if it's a level 3 remodel, which is 50% of the building area is getting remodeled, or if it's greater than 500 square feet, or if the addition is greater than 500 square feet, then you're still on the same threshold. Again, we don't want someone that's going to just add on a couple thousand here and there, but again, adding additions is better than totally, scraping away and restarting. So we do want to incentivize that aspect of it.
Is that it?
Yes.
I did speak to Councilor Infante before the meeting, and just to clarify that I think everyone is pretty aware that we have held a couple of public meetings, and that were well advertised. We had quite a bit of a few contractors, architects, planners, and actually just a couple of interested laypersons that came and asked questions during our drafting of this, and they did help shape what came out. And we also did take the time to run some real world projects through these examples to see, do the point thresholds that we were proposing make sense? Are we proposing something that's unattainable? And are we getting to where we want to really be, or are we just making this really arduous for the building community? And so we had a lot of meetings, had a lot of brain damage on Friday morning meetings, and we're able to really, I think those were really helpful, going through those real world examples to figure out what really worked, what didn't, and adjust our points accordingly.
Great.
So,
Okay.
Happy to answer the questions you have.
I think at this point, we're just going to take a break. This is a public hearing, it looks like, and I'm sure there really isn't any, but we'll open the public hearing at 7:10. Is there anyone in the public who has any comments regarding this change? Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and go to, yes.
Mayor, I move that Town Council adopt ordinance number 11, series of 2018 on second reading.
Second.
Comment.
Further discussion?
I would love when you come back on the education piece and how we're granting $10,000 for the education piece in 1 year's time, or when the granting process occurs again, if you can report back what the attendance numbers were for that. That'd be great. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you so
Nice
much.
work.
Nice job.
Now
Thank
get
you.
out of here and don't come back.
For another 2 years.
Exactly.
We've entered the new millennium.
Thank you.
You don't come back in 2 years, you do it for 2 years, so you are constantly doing it.
Buildings that currently
Okay.
meet the old standard anyway.
Oh, jeez. Okay, ready? The next item is, Counselor, just a sec. The next item is a public hearing and consideration of Resolution 13 of 2018, a resolution of the Town of Basalt approving the TICA sketch plan, or considering such a thing.
And I'm gonna introduce it, but I just wanted to make sure everybody was kind of sitting in their place. So,
Take it, Susan.
okay, this is a sketch plan approval for the arts campus at Willits, who's proposed a development now called the permanent, as kind of the segue from.
Not really.
the temporary.
Your title.
But what I want to do first is just introduce members of the team so you guys know who's here in the audience. So we have Julia Marshall and Ryan Honey, and they're going to start the presentation by, I think, giving some background about the efforts that they have and the programming. And then Michael Lipkin and Jeff Orsolak from Lipkin Warner are going to talk about more about the specifics about the building. Jody Edwards, who is now on the board of TACA, is here. Dick Carter, who's on the board of TACA, is here, and Mark Breslin is here, who's on the board.
He's
Is
the
that
artistic director.
what?
He's the artistic director.
Oh.
Used to be on the board.
He
now
used to be
staff
on the
member.
board. Okay, so I don't have the latest. He was on the board. He's now the artistic director. Are there any other people that you guys wanted to introduce? So,
It's the gang.
I was going to make,
Gonna write a great article about it.
you know, what I wanted to do is a little bit different than our normal, because I just wanted to give some brief introductory remarks about where we are in the process, turn it over to them so that they can explain more what the building is. And then after they make their presentation, I'm just going to highlight 3 of the discussion items that we talked about with the P&Z, and then have council questions. Actually, go to the public hearing and then have kind of council discussion. So this is a 19,000 square foot performing arts facility. They're retaining the right or kind of the ability to potentially have up to a 10,000 square foot basement in the facility. And in terms of history, the parcel is called the Town Park Arts Tract. It's part of the Willits Town Center PUD. James, you have the pointer, so if you could just maybe point is this particular site here. The town's owned that since 2001, and it came into the town's ownership as part of the Willits Town Center development approvals. Along with that came the famous Arts RETA, whereby they were trying to have an additional funding source to help fund an arts center. I think you've had several other kind of presentations about what the use of that arts RETA can be used for. So over the last few years, we've had a number of different actions regarding TACA. The 2 significant ones that I just want to talk about is first, the town of Basalt still owns the property, but we have a lease with TACA for them to build a performing arts facility on this parcel. And that lease is structured very similar to the lease that the town of Basalt has with the River Center, this being just ready for its CO now. And just like with that lease, there's performance deadlines in there. And what that lease requires is that it was like a 5-year process. You would have to actually build the center and take occupancy. There were some interim steps, and that first interim step is that as a performance deadline that we have by July 1st, 2018, that we're looking to have sketch plan approval. And then 2 years later, July 1st, 2020, actually have a building permit, and then by 2022 have built the facility. So that's kind of the time frame. There's also, as you know, a resolution that deals with funding and how we turn over the RETA. We're not really scheduled to talk about that today, because really what we're here is to talk about the land use approval. The other thing I just want to say about the lease is that the lease does have some things that get carried over that affect land use approvals. You might remember that there was some concern by the art base that it become a performing arts center, that it be a performing arts center and not a visual arts center. So there's some conditions so that they don't compete, and those kind of eventually in the final plan approval will affect the uses on the property. I actually had it in front of me, and then of course I buried it, but I was going to read to you what our code says about sketch plans, because what the purpose of the sketch plan is really to kind of introduce the character of the project to the town council. It's to highlight any issues that need to be resolved before approval, and maybe identify kind of solutions to how we get to that approval. So I think it's really important, you'll hear me say this now, and then I think at the end, after we do the, kind of when I'm highlighting the 3 discussion items, is that what we're trying to do here is set what expectations the council has when they come back with a final plan, what items that they have to address, and kind of how we see those being resolved. And so that's what all those conditions and the resolution deal with. We had the P&Z, we got this application in early May. The P&Z reviewed it at a public hearing last week and recommended approval with the conditions that are in that draft resolution that you have. And this is, because it's sketch plan, it's only, you could approve it tonight, you wouldn't see it again, and then until final sketch plans approved by a resolution. We identified like 12, different items for the P&Z to review, everything from building size and orientation to loading. I am just going to talk about 3 of those, being the parking, the traffic, and affordable housing at the end, and there's any of the other ones that you guys want to discuss, we can discuss those in more detail. And with that, I think what I'll do is turn it over to Julia and let them kind of walk you through in better detail than I can what the programming and then the building is. So Julia?
Thank you, Susan. So I'm Julia Marshall, and first of all, I just want to thank all of you for the time that you are spending to review this project and listening to us, and we take your ideas seriously, and I've always felt that one of the best things about coming in front of a council is that we both want this project to succeed, I hope, and so your comments help us reach a higher level. So we're here to be open to your suggestions and to share the information that we have with you about what has happened with DECA over the last couple of years. So let's see. Oh, I get the pointer? Oh, okay. So why are we here? Because one of the things that was evident at the time that we signed the lease is that
Gary, thanks so much.
We couldn't look to the future to say how we could measure whether or not we would be successful, and we needed to have the confidence to be able to proceed with the permanent from both the aspects of, like, are people going to come to this facility? Are people going to want to have this kind of cultural institution in their valley? And would we be able to financially prove ourselves in a certain way? So the lessons learned from the temporary is that we have been able to do a wide range of programming, and thus we have a very interesting audience that comes. And I'm always sort of intrigued that when Mark or Ryan ask if somebody has been there the first time, still half of the audience raises their hand. And so the need has definitely been demonstrated by the people who are coming through the door. And right now we have attendance at events that are frequently fill the house. And like even tonight, I think we could have sold twice the number of tickets. The temporary has, it's one of those things I remember in the board meeting when we decided to vote to proceed with the temporary, we're all like, is this a good thing? And how do you know if you're doing a good thing? And so there was this trepidation about like moving forward. But what the temporary has become for us is a real testing ground for how we'll be able to operate the permanent. So for instance, when we started the temporary, we actually only had one employee. We had Ryan, and then we now have an artistic director. We now have someone who is managing the temporary itself. And we're able to work on things which you probably are not interested in, but like a flow chart on when a musician comes to the door, like how do you handle that person? And so we're using the temporary as a very good way of testing how we can operate a larger facility. The other thing that we're working very hard on is understanding how you balance both the ticket sales with the operation cost and also getting money from donors. And I have to thank our donors because it is making such a difference to know that our community is reaching out to support us, and every person who comes through the door and buys a ticket is just another validation that we are on the right track. And because of these successes, which Ryan is really going to address in talking about the programming, it's like it really does validate why we're here tonight and moving forward with the sketch plans.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ryan Honey. I'm the Executive Director of the Arts Campus at Willits. We operate the Temporary. I first want to apologize. I think the attendance here at Town Council tonight was greatly affected by our event that we had there this evening. We are busting at the seams with Joshua Johnson. Sold out 3 weeks ago. The room is full of people that are excited and engaged, and that is what we are seeing night after night after night at the Temporary. So I want to do, what I want to do here now is just take a few minutes to talk about what's happening over there, give you a sense of what's going on at the Temporary, because that is why we need the permanent facility. So 2 years ago, when I joined this team, this graphic that you're looking at now was the visual representation of the vision for the Arts Campus, a hub that is able to service all of these programmatic areas. And this is something I want you to just take a look at and reference, because we're going to come back to it. And one of the things we've learned at the Temporary is how critical collaborations and partnerships are to be successful in programming across all of these areas. So I wanted to highlight here our current list of nonprofit partners, which I provided to you in my annual report. You can see we work with partners up and down the valley to do all kinds of programming, from lectures to music to film to children's entertainment, family entertainment, Spanish language programming. We actually just added another nonprofit partner today. We just worked out with Aspen Santa Fe Ballet. They're going to be doing Folklorico, which we're very, very excited about coming up. And so we're continuing to work with nonprofit partners and to make sure that we're using culture to enhance their missions and enhance our community. So you're going to see this list continue to grow over time. Some of these groups we partner with multiple times, and the rest we will continue to partner with, because it's a critical piece of how we program. So here's just a short list of some event highlights. Again, these are just some of my personal highlights, but I wanted to share them with you to give you just a bit of a flavor of what's happening at the Temporary week in and week out. So one of my personal favorites is our collaboration with the New York International Children's Film Festival. We had 2 programs with them last year, one geared to kids 5 to 9 and then 9 and over. This is essentially the anti-Disney. It's films from around the world that are appropriate for kids, help them learn how to appreciate cinema and learn about culture through cinema. We've now partnered with them a second time, and we're adding a Spanish language program for kids, which will be also short films from around the world in Spanish, which is very exciting. We also hosted Immigrant Voices with English in Action, incredible event. We're doing that again in November. We had local immigrants sharing their stories. Comedian Ben Roy, he was just the funniest comic we've had. We do a lot of comedy, and our community comes together and enjoys laughter. Amy Goodman, the independent journalist, came. It was a remarkable evening. The room was literally packed like sardines. People just kept coming, and she had said, I don't want to say no to anybody, so we kept letting people in, and it was a remarkable evening. I want to highlight the jazz with Walt Smith. We do lots of jazz, and these ones with Walt Smith are on Sunday afternoons at 4 o'clock, and the average age is probably about 82. And the room is packed. It's wonderful to see that community come together and see one of their peers up there doing what he does, and it's remarkable. One of my favorite films that we did was the Anthony Bourdain film Wasted. We partnered with ACES to show that movie and then serve food that was otherwise going to be wasted and thrown away, and then we had a panel talk about how we can all do better. The Leak was a hip-hop act. I enjoy having some hip-hop in our valley. We had the Colorado Shakespeare Festival come up. We partnered with Kodak to teach kids how to shoot movies so they don't think that phones are how you shoot movies. We've had incredible music. A highlight was Shook Twins and Dust Bowl Revival. And then we partnered with Jazz Aspen and the Rock and Roll Academy to have kids perform on our stages to showcase their work. And we have about 15 bands now from kids around here who their first time performing for an audience was at the Temporary. And that's exciting to me because that's changing the trajectory of their life. So just those are some of my personal highlights, but to just give you a sense of the breadth, the scope, the scale of what we're doing over there. It's validating our vision night in and night out. And it's amazing, as Julia touched upon, how different the audience is every night. One night when we have the honky-tonk nights, it's one crowd. When we have a movie night, it's another crowd. And the joy is watching those crowds start to come together to interact and interface, and it's a very exciting time. So just some key statistics that I want to share with you all. Since opening the temporary, we've had 125 events, and that is exactly on par with the pro forma we submitted as part of the Arts Consulting Group analysis of our business plan. So we are tracking exactly where we thought we wanted to be. We've had 1,266 kids participate in our Kids Culture Series, which is a Saturday afternoons series of programming for kids. We've done magic, we've done movies, we've done music, we've done theater, and those kids light up. On average, we have 2 to 4 educational classes or workshops per week, and that is just a function of we don't have enough space. We would be doing way more educational programming, but because of the function of the temporary, if we have a show that night, you can't really have after-school programming because you're loading in. We are on pace in 2018 to have over 1,500 ticketed patrons come through. This doesn't account for the hundreds of additional guests who come to our free events and as well as the private events that we do host the temporary. And I want to just point out that the average arts patron spends about $25 above and beyond the price of a ticket when they come to an arts event. That's some NEA data from 2012. It's probably more than that several years later. Given this, we can expect to generate $375,000 in economic activity around the temporary in 2018. So if you go to the restaurants in and around Willits, at about 8 o'clock they empty out and everyone comes to us, and about 10 o'clock they fill up again. So you can see that happening there, which is good. So I want to just come back to that opening graphic that I showed you and then show you what we've achieved so far on that graphic. And I think this is an important piece to highlight because there's some holes there that we can't fill at the temporary. We cannot do culinary arts at the temporary. We don't have a kitchen there. We can't serve, we can't prepare food of any kind there. We're limited in terms of the scope and scale of theater and music that we present. Just this summer, we were in conversations with Edie Brickell to try to bring her here, and we started to run the numbers on the math. She wanted to come, but we couldn't make it work unless we were going to charge hundreds of dollars per ticket. There are numerous acts that we could be bringing to our community that we know we could sell tickets to, that we need more space to do that. And then on the educational side, we recently had a meeting with teachers and arts educators and administrators from up and down the valley. We're planning several more of these, but we heard loud and clear from them, we need space. We need more space in the Mid-Valley to do what we do. Right now, our educational programming, we partnered early on with the Rock and Roll Academy to offer them a space, and he's doing great work, and it's incredible. He wants more space, and that's one nonprofit, and there are dozens that we're ready to partner with to do more. So we're doing great in terms of what we're touching on. We can do so much more. I think this community is ready for so much more, and that's been demonstrated by the temporary, and that's why we want to build the permanent. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeff and Michael and talk about how the permanent is going to allow us to continue to fill in these circles.
Let's see.
You want to sit here, Michael?
Sure. Julie, I think we're going to talk about a site plan first, and maybe you'd like to talk about that a little.
I'd be glad to.
Sure. I'll let you locate us and talk about the streets a little bit first, okay?
Okay. Is this the better place to point right here? Okay, so if you are at Whole Foods, right here, come down the block and then go to the end, the Element Hotel is right here, and you go to the end of Market Street, then the parcel is located right off of what is Lewis Lane and off of Willits Lane. Locating you again, here is Market Street, here is Willits Lane, and then here is Lewis Lane. And one of the things that has been interesting is that we've worked with Tim Belinsky and Mariners to actually design a Market Street so that Act could be closed off, have a couple of pavilions on either side, and then Market Street could act as an expansion for outdoor functions, and it could be have no traffic, no cars in it, and then you are able to actually have some activities here that then join with the facility that is right here. Parking occurs along Robinson Street, on Lewis Lane, and on Pioneer Street. The drop-off for the site is right here, and the main entrance for the building is off of Robinson Street.
So this is the first look at the building we're going to take. And by the way, this is Jeff Werselak standing next to me. I'm Michael Lipkin. And just to give us a little historical perspective, the first time the idea of a performing arts facility at Willits was discussed was 20 years ago. Jackie was in the room, Jody Edwards was the town attorney, Susan was in the room, Julia Marshall was in the room. So this has been incubating for quite a while.
Wait a minute. Jody Edwards isn't any older, so it couldn't have been him.
Yep, Pam was in the room. So, it's just sort of interesting because I know all of you are always struggling every week with how you make decisions and what the impact will be over time. And I just want to say that, how important the jobs we all do, Susan does, all of us do, to try to plan for the future, try to keep up with what goes on in this valley, and try to deliver something that has resonance not only when you walk out of this meeting, but 5, 10, and 20 years later. And I think the town has done a terrific job with Willits, monitoring and stewarding the growth of Willits. So here we are, ready to do a building that not only takes off from what we've learned at the temporary, but hopefully is this community's commitment to not only ourselves in a current need, but our children in the valley for a very long time. So this is a first look at the building, and I'll talk for just a second about the exterior materials. We are looking at using the dark charcoal material is a charred spruce, which is a building material that has been used in the Orient forever, and they're in China, they're 1,000-year-old churches that were built with charred spruce. So it is truly a sustainable material. We did get to it first looking at using basalt stone, which very much has this look. I'm afraid for us it stretches our budget. But I'd like to walk us through the building for a minute, and then we'll come back outside and talk about it some more. And Jeff and I and the whole team are here to answer any questions you guys have. Yeah. This is the back of the building, and it is the side of the building that gets serviced, and it is points towards Willits Lane, and maybe we'll come back to this a little bit later and move into the building now. This is the corner approaching from the northwest, and that's the front door. We will now walk into the building. Oh, we'll take a look.
Bob Dylan is going to play?
I'm sorry?
It's going to be great. It's going to be great.
Did you see the other names on there?
Tickets?
And NWH, yeah.
Some of us may be showing our age with these choices. But quick look at the building here. We are at the front door here. We're about to look at a plan that's a little more detailed, but what I want us to notice here is this is the lobby space, a bit of a bar, what we think of as the lounge, the front door, and all of the spaces basically wrap and are accessed from this lobby space. And the lobby also opens up onto this park-like listening room amphitheater out here that we think will be an important and active part of this building. And out here is a covered terrace. And just to make that a little bit clearer, again, this is this garden that we wrap. It's south-facing and ought to be a very active and lovely space for us. This, again, is basically the circulation through the building, which is also our lobby. So we are, oops.
Broke it.
Yep, broke it. All right. Here we are, front door. Over here is the project room, which we'll talk about in a little while. It's a very important space for us. The offices that service the building, bathrooms, commercial kitchen that will service the entire building, and the outdoor spaces, and the lobby, and the big space, and the small space. Over here is what we call the contemporary. That is an updated version of the temporary, but very much the same scale, the same charm, the same character that has become so beloved for our community. And then we have, obviously, a much larger space here. If we sort of look at that again, this is our project room. What we have learned and what Ryan was talking about is, so I guess last week we had a group with meeting with how many education?
15 educators.
15 educators in the valley, all looking for space to rehearse on a daily basis, perform occasionally, perform in a small space, perform in a big space. Every one of these educators had an idea about how to use every space in this building immediately. To the point that I think we were kind of stunned, and we now think about that request for 10,000 square feet in the basement, because I think this community's need for civic space, art space, cultural space is so far beyond what we anticipated. And I don't know how carefully any of you noticed the list Ryan put up of our partnerships, but there isn't an Aspen cultural organization that isn't interested in what we're doing and appreciates how much of their audience is down here and what they're unable to do and unable to service. So again, you know, it's just been a resounding need for us as we go through this. So these are the bathrooms back in here. Here is a commercial kitchen. It's about 1,200 square feet. It is large enough to do any kind of event we could imagine doing, and it opens directly into the Contemporary over here, the big space here, out into the lobby, could handle events out here. But as we know, food is not only a culinary art, it's what makes events happen. If I go to the next slide, this is just a picture of, you know, we are at schematic, so nothing's like it's going to be built, but this is an intention that we have a space that very much isn't just a lobby, really a lounge for us. Off to the right, we see the Contemporary. If we're going to make a sharp left now and look down the lobby space that services the big hall to the right, but you can see we look out into the courtyard space, and these glass panels will open up, so we have very much an indoor-outdoor feel in this space and an ability to have events that lead from the big space to the right out into the lobby outside. And what we have highlighted right now is, again, the Contemporary. It's our basically moving the much beloved, charming, absolutely perfect little gem we have there now. We'd like to transplant that over here. If I will get a look inside there, but for those of you that have been to the Temporary, I think you can recognize the scale, the lighting, and the feel in this space. This is the big theater. Oh, let me go back to the Contemporary for just 1 second. Just capacity. This comfortably seats about 120 seated and about 200 standing. I'm going to take us now to the big theater, where we can handle about 420 people seated and about 600 standing. And as you'll see in a second, there are a number of ways that can be configured. Seating for these kinds of flexible spaces now has become extremely sophisticated, so we are able to, with a considerable amount of effort, but not an unrealistic amount, take out standard concert hall seating and make it work for theater in the round, for a cabaret, or just get all the seats out of there for a dance hall, and then we can handle about 600. These are important numbers because we have studied these kinds of facilities both up in Aspen, around the state, and around the country, and we're sort of in a sweet spot for performers who are going around the country, all kinds, and are able to make economic sense out of a facility this size. I gotta say, we've had tremendous entertainment at the Temporary. But we have bands coming up from Denver with 4 people in them, getting paid $700 or $800, you know, which is barely gas money to get up here just because artists need a place to play. But artists that are actually making a living, we really need to supply a venue like this to honor what they do, and our community is certainly prepared to support that by all evidence we have. So if we go into this room, here we are at the back of the fixed seating for a concert like this. If we look back up, this is what we're looking at. We do have a balcony on the upper level. The balcony handles about 50 people in addition to 366 in this more conventional seating. If we look, this is the layout from the stage. You're looking at a layout for cabaret where there are raised tables on the right and left. There's a dance floor in the middle. Those people are actually dancing. And on the upper level, we have a balcony. This is looking down from the balcony. And again, this is a classic state-of-the-art, 21st century flexible space that can accommodate most of the things we anticipate being able to do in this space. We're back outside here. Jeff, do you want to talk a little about how this gets serviced? Because I know
we had a good conversation with P&Z about service and how we service the building, how these events work, and so we thought we'd just walk everybody through that a little bit. Like Julia and Michael said, this is the front of the building. This is where everybody's going to come into our different events. This zone here becomes a place where cars can come and drop people off. So if somebody's elderly, they want to drop them off at the front, they can do that. And then what we've tried to do is we've collected all of our spaces along this back wall, and that allows us to service them all from a central location. So this central location provides access to the back of the large hall, the back of the kitchen, and the back of the contemporary. What's nice about that is depending on the event, we can service back and forth and load everybody in from the back, which is somewhat how the temporary works to some degree, but in a temporary fashion. This is the permanent fashion of doing that. So I think that kind of lays out how we plan to service the building.
So we're back outside again, and I just want to say, what we didn't talk too much about is the ability to have numerous things going on simultaneously. So we can have the Rock and Roll Academy performing, we can have a film going on or a lecture in the small theater, and either an event going on in the big space or event being prepared for. We'll have certain things that may take a day or two to stage things, which we couldn't do today, but now we can keep the building active pretty much all the time. And at 19,000 feet, we feel we will address almost the immediate need, but there will be an ongoing need for all of us to think about what the appetite really is and the need is in this valley to support the arts. There's nothing we can do that's more important for improving our schools or making our community all the more vital, and the community is really showing up for it. And if anybody has skepticism about what happens when we make these decisions, our board member Dick Carter is here, who was one of the founders of the Aspen Art Museum 40 years ago. So we're all taking the long view, and we're all working hard, and we're I'm not sure I have much to add.
That's great, yeah.
Go back.
I think we could take questions or.
Items first.
Okay, is that all your presentation? Was lovely, was beautiful. Susan's got a couple of items, and we're gonna go to a public hearing. We're kind of tried to squeeze too much in here, it looks like, but we need to
And James,
play
if you
this
could
out.
pull, yeah, that's perfect. I just wanted to mention two things before I kind of talk about the three discussion items that I wanted to highlight. And one is just a further explanation on how the Willits Town Center PUD works. The other contribution that the developer agreed to back in 2001 is that the developer essentially has to build the outside infrastructure. So the developer has to build the streets and the parking, and there's certain triggers on all of that, and that's one of the things that we asked the applicant to kind of work on a little bit before final, is exactly how all that happens. But it's also that the developer in the Willits Town Center PUD actually has the responsibility for the major kind of impacts of the property and how they're mitigated in terms of traffic, and you'll hear me talk a little bit more about that when I get into the discussion items. The other thing is I'd mentioned that the P&Z reviewed this, and the P&Z recommended approval, and that the conditions reflect the P&Z's motion. The P&Z had two additions to the conditions that staff had. One, they wanted more work to kind of continue on the loading. And if you guys want to talk about loading more, we can, but the condition just kind of simply directs them to work more on it. And also that parking area that's right behind Market Street, to work with their own engineers and our engineers and flush that out a little bit more. And the other thing that the P&Z asked is just that the entryway, the main entry that Michael showed, which is at Robinson and Market, that maybe it be further studied just to see if it could have more of a civic presence. Obviously, putting basalt rock would be, I think, what the P&Z is kind of looking at, but I think Michael kind of addressed that might be out of line with their budget. But again, just kind of directing them to kind of look at that entryway. So the three items that I just wanted to pick out, and then I'm going to ask you if there's another one of these discussion items rather than go into everyone in detail, is really the program for satisfying the parking needs, traffic, and affordable housing. So that's kind of what I picked to kind of highlight with you. And James, if you could, can I have the, yeah, excellent. So in terms of parking and traffic, we're relying a lot on the work that had been done previously, not only the FHU study that was done back in 2015, but also the work that Charlier had done last year when we were looking at the overall PUD amendment. If you remember when we were looking at switching the residential, the commercial to more residential, and we were looking at getting rid of Reed Street, one of the particular items that we asked Jim Charlier, and Jim Charlier is a traffic consultant, he's a parking consultant. He did a lot of work for the town previously in terms of helping with TOD, which stands for Transit Oriented Development.
And he may be older than me. We're not sure.
So we asked Charlier at that time, anticipating like, why would we remove parking if we weren't sure that Taka could be parked? So we asked them, can we park Taka on the street? Because one of the questions is, do they have to have any on-site parking? Can they park on the street? So Jim had he met with Taka and went over kind of their scenarios of what they were looking at in terms of programming and the size of the building, and they had kind of this high expected and low kind of parking demand for Taka. This is kind of a refresher of where you were, and I know Ryan was on P&Z, so he saw this. Bill Infante was not on the council yet, so this might be new, but basically just a highlight is there was these nice easy bar graphs that Jim Charlier did for us, and the green here shows the residual parking that we have today, and then this blue here shows the residual parking that we have at build out of Willis Town Center. And so this one was just saying, if everything happens the way we think it's gonna happen, with the expected use for parking at Taka, then we're gonna be fine. We're gonna have this available space here, and we're gonna be good. He also did this downside proposal, like what happens if Taka is amazingly successful? Jeff didn't show like how many seats. I do have a little chart that shows like how many standing room do you have, and if you had a standing room in the big facility, you had a standing room in the little facility, and we lost the underground parking garage at Willits Town Center, we would have a parking shortage, and that's kind of what this little bar here came into. So this next slide doesn't have anything to do with what we're really talking about today, so I'm just going to keep that up there so you don't have to look at it. But what one of the conditions does is it asks Taka to come back with a parking management and operation plan at final. And with that parking operation and management plan, what we're expecting to see in it is kind of a monitoring of where we are on parking. The concern of the police department, the concern of the rest of the Basalt Technical Review Committee is that it's okay to have interim parking problems and shortages. What we're trying to prevent is people parking, by way of example, on Willits Lane or parking repeatedly in the residential neighborhoods, which, obviously is a problem that we want to prevent. So, if those triggers happen, the plan, we're expecting it to address things like they would have to adjust their schedule in those cases. And regardless, that they would include information in their webpage and their ticketing in terms of the availability of the mass transit, bicycles, rideshare. The good news about Willits Town Center and Sopris Village is we see a lot of walkers and bikers, and that's really encouraging. And I would say that overall, what we're seeing in Basalt is just we are seeing more bikers in terms of when we're having major events. It was really impressive at Motors on Midland that so many people came to that event on bicycles, so we want to encourage that. And that was kind of segueing another recommendation of Jim Charlier in terms of bicycles. So those numbers that we had in the condition weren't just pulled out by staff. We got some input from Jim Charlier, and Jim said, you know, based on the standards that are out there, he was recommending that they identify 20 parking spaces, bicycle parking within 100 feet of the entryway, and then another potential 20 if the demand for bicycle parking became extremely high and there was a shortage of bicycle parking. And, you know, before final, again, we'll meet with the ride share, if it's WeCycle or whoever, to talk about the proper locations of that. So the conditions really kind of set up to have a management program for parking. So I'll segue a little bit to traffic. Again, the traffic mitigation, the major elements of mitigating traffic in Willits Town Center are the developer's responsibilities. In terms of when we added additional square footage in Willits Town Center, they did a major traffic study in 2015. We call that the FHU study. The conditions that we included in that approval were that they, every plat that Willits Town Center submits, they have to kind of submit a kind of status of where they are, and do they need a transportation demand management program. And that's just without getting into a lot of detail, just trying to, again, manage traffic in Willits Town Center so that you don't have these peak periods that would cause backups, by way of example, into the roundabout. When we did the amendments in last year, we actually reduced the traffic because residential has such a lower traffic generation than commercial. So we're pretty comfortable that we're all okay with our access permit requirements with CDOT. We do ask the applicant in here to confirm before final to our satisfaction that the traffic study that was done has sufficient trips for their development, along with the kind of the flexibility that's built into that. And if they're gonna have a basement, that they reflect those trips. So it's more, again, kind of details that we want them to work out before their final application. Then the last thing I want to talk about is affordable housing. So in terms of affordable housing, TCA is comfortable that they don't have any affordable housing requirement. They're kind of basing that on the language that's in the original PUD documents. And we're kind of recognizing that at the time that the Willits Town Center approvals were put in place in 2001, it was clear that there wouldn't have been an affordable housing obligation for this site. And so the condition speaks to the relationship between the town and the developer in terms of their affordable housing requirement, and it was very specific about what that was. It was based on commercial and residential development and their impacts in that calculation. The town at that time did not have any affordable housing requirement for itself or for other nonprofits. We put one on later, but actually the way it works is you can ask for a waiver in the process after a recommendation from the planning director. A couple other things maybe to note is in 2007 and 2010, we amended the Willits Town Center approvals to allow for residential on the town-owned properties. Before it wasn't even permitted, but we didn't mandate that anybody put affordable housing on there. And the reason that we have this provision in the code is when we looked at the library approvals, we didn't have anything for affordable housing, and we thought it would be a good idea to
we couldn't require them to consider it because it wasn't in our code. So we included it in the code, but we allowed a waiver. And to this time, we haven't ever required any nonprofit to put or build affordable housing. So, you know, or cost money, I would say it that way. We haven't made them pay money to build or pay affordable housing. For the River Center, we waived the affordable housing requirements like allowed for in the code. In RMI, we made it financially neutral because we had them convey the affordable housing to us, and then we gave them the land and paid for their infrastructure. So it was it didn't cost them money to do anything for affordable housing. The adult continuing care facility that was in Stotts Mill area, that was a little different. It had some funky stuff about a unit and a RETA, but it didn't go forward. So, but basically, our general thing has been to look at it, but we've waived it to date. So we thought it was a little bit of a gray area. We didn't think it was a good place for affordable housing, though we thought that the site is awfully tight. I mean, it's amazing that when you're looking at this, that the amenities, the garden area, the entryways, that we thought, as far as staff's perspective, that they were better used for the performing arts facility, and that if we were going to have affordable housing, that we should put it on parcel 2E, or that we, you know, the 2 units, the additional units that we got for Willits Town Center, that could be used for a rationale. So the condition that we're recommending says to eliminate any confusion in the future, the affordable housing mitigation requirement is waived to the extent that there is any current requirement. And I didn't get into the legal thing much on that, but you know, again, it's kind of a gray, it's a gray area, a light gray area, I would say. You know, now that you're on the board, you're probably not getting paid anymore, so you may as well.
Well, anyway, these are the 12 kind of discussion items that we had, and just to be efficient with time, I didn't think it was maybe necessary to go over any of the other ones, but if there's anything else that you would like us to kind of highlight, we're glad to do it.
Well, I think now that the presentations are kind of on the table, this says it's a public hearing, right? Okay, so I'm gonna open the public hearing now, just in case there's anybody here who has comment. Open the public hearing at almost 8 o'clock, close the public hearing at almost 8 o'clock. Okay, how would you like us to proceed, Susan?
I think it would be helpful if there's any burning questions that you guys have that you would like to have us answer before you take action. Again, we set this up for approval by resolution. So we were basically looking for discussion and hopefully a motion. But if you're not comfortable, you know, you could continue it and give us some direction about what.
Well, let me just kick this off by saying that we actually have another agenda item after this, which is sad that it looks like we really miscalculated time enough for you guys. So that's going to be the council's call in general, whether how much we go versus if, you know, we can put it off to the next meeting. I just wanted to throw out that in general, I really like the looks of this thing. It's not like overwhelming urban to me. The only thing that hits me in the face is the parking part, and but I've kind of rationalized in my mind that this is an urban sort of setting now, and as Susan was saying, it's not, if you want to come to an event, you will get there. Whether you have a car or a bus or a bike or a ride from somebody, or praise God, Uber, which doesn't seem to be catching any wings around here. But it still is one thing that does sort of bother me, because some people will, as we have seen with RAFTA and other locations, some people will encroach on other people's parking and on private property and wherever. So all I would say is work on that with us. I mean, I saw that there's suggestions in here, but they sound like only suggestions. please ask nicely for your patrons to figure out the right way to get here. But that's really all I have on this. This is, the conceptual is better than I expected even. I didn't know what I expected, but I think it's quite beautiful. The housing thing, from my memory and from reading this, I always assumed there would not be a housing requirement, so I don't know why we're talking about it quite so long. And traffic, once again, I think that kind of falls in the same category as the parking, which is, you know, it's gonna have to work itself out. We've done too much in some areas already where there's clogging and congestion at certain times of the day, but I think you might be outside those timeframes in your high times. So that's kind of all I have. I would love to see this thing roll, but would like to hear what other people have to say. I know some people are going to have questions. Oh, one more thing. As Susan said, keep this kind of conceptual and big picture. If we can, my phraseology, not get into the size of the pipes, that would be great, because that's for down the road, and keep it up here somewhere.
I agree with everything you said. I think it's beautiful, exciting. I'd love to see it move forward tonight, and we can get into the details later. It just is a very thorough project you've done so far, so congrats.
Bill?
Just a really quick one. I think success speaks for itself, and the board has done an extraordinary job of charting a mission, sticking to its vision. You have a formidable executive team that has produced arts, culture, musical events that have enriched our town, and I want to thank you for that. I think that any public good requires money, and frankly, the money that we invest through the RITA is probably some of the best money that we spend on behalf of the public. My only question, I would love to ask you to invite our support as town councilors to the extent that we can in assisting you in your grant-seeking or fundraising processes in a manner that is analogous to what the chamber did just recently. They're applying for a grant, they solicited councilor support, we provided that support, or at least some of us did. I would invite you to do the same to the extent that we can within all of the boundaries of integrity and ethics that Jeff will keep us on the straight and narrow for. But I think Basalt deserves to be very proud of what you've accomplished so far, and we look forward to the permanent.
Just so you know, even though you're an elected official, you are still a person, and you can do anything without town resources that you want to. So, others? Katie?
I think it's a lovely building. I share the same concerns about parking and traffic, and I just wonder if there can be a relationship created somehow with RAFTA, since there's a conveniently located bus stop. I don't know how you could incentivize that, but try to find a way to get people out of their cars, because they might then want to partake with some beverages after an event, and we would love to have them on the bus. And then, I know this is getting in the weeds, but I'm just gonna go there. And that's Eagle County requires mass gathering permits whenever you have an event of 600 or more people. And I'm just wondering, when you're saying that one room can have 600 people, another room can have 120 people, like how are we as a town going to handle this massive influx of people on our services? And I don't think we have a mass gathering permit process like Eagle County, but do we need to contemplate that if we're gonna have potentially 720 human beings in a particular place? That
Can you say what that looks like, just for me, because I don't know what that is?
So mass gathering permit, if it's 600 people or more that you're expecting to be in a certain venue, you have to go through a process in which Eagle County approves your request, and they go to the referral agencies to make sure that, like Basalt Fire has the appropriate level of paramedic, medical, fire, because the reality is there's still gonna be thousands of us needing these services, and then Takaw is gonna need services for 700, potentially 720 people. If there's an incident, a fire, a heart attack, whatever, how do we as a community make sure that that event is supported while our general needs are also supported? So
You know,
that's what
I
a
think
mass
we
gathering
could, I
permit
think we
does.
could add a condition for us to look at that. Because what we do now is if we have a large indoor event that's gonna affect our services, but we treat it as safety in terms of right-of-way. Like RMI, when they have large events, we actually require them to get a special event activity permit. But I think it's a very appropriate thing for us to ask the applicant to meet with emergency service personnel, because they probably have a magic number. It may not be 600 where, so I think it's a very good thing to add to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'd be happy to. We've worked with the fire department in terms of making sure we're doing everything correctly there, and we're happy to continue those conversations to look at this issue.
Okay, thanks.
Is that it?
That's it.
Whoa.
Ryan?
No, I'm good.
Jen?
I'm gonna rattle these off in page number. I think it's really exciting opportunity. One piece of learning, a house that I manage has the charred wood exterior, and it's very inconducive for people to rub against it. It rubs off on your clothes, and you get charcoal. And if you lean on the building, you're covered in charcoal. And through time, it does dissipate some, but not like you would expect. So FYI, for a large public space where people are mingling, standing around, I know it's within the budget, but just think about that one. Then I'm going to, since there's not sequential numbers through the packet, I'm going to go from the digital download. If you, I know, we're gonna go like analog versus paper.
Do you want paper?
No, because
Okay.
I wrote my notes for digital. Okay, so page 79, and these aren't questions that need to be answered now. I just like these addressed before final. Page 79, with the wording around competing with art-based or a visual arts organization, same thing with my point with WeCycle, is to change the wording so that it can be an unknown at this time visual arts organization, not just have it set to that one name. Page 104, square foot clarification with phase 1 is 20,000 above and 10,000 below. And then phase 2, it was just kind of vacuous. I'm not on board with approving a vacuous amount of square footage into the
So
future.
you're only approving a sketch plan for the 19 plus the 10.
Okay.
It won't include phase 2, it's only phase 1.
Okay, great.
Sorry
And then, page 115, the parking anticipated PUD application is asking, to have the developer provide the streets and all of that. And just to, you did discuss that, but just to confirm that that is on board, that is written in platinum or whatever we want to have it written in. Page 116, item 3A, clarify more about the facility rental concerns. And then page 117, 4E, expand on, let's see, 17, 117, 4E, the pre-development agreement, and that a letter, and so there's, I didn't see that what town of Basalt asked for in 4E, I don't see the information that was requested for that. Like ordinance 10, series 17 has superseded the pre-development agreement and establishes the steps from lease agreement through construction. Just love to have that included in the packet for final. And then same thing for F on page 117, the wording of the definition of a nonprofit entity, that wasn't included in there, so I wasn't clear on where that was going. For G, where is the documentation, which was please meet with the Willits developer to review to cause expectations of the role of Willits Town Center in making the performing arts facility a reality and document the results of that conversation in the application. I don't see that in here. But I'd like to see all that documentation. And then page 133, it comes to the traffic impact analysis. That same thing that was brought up of the numbers are far greater. So when the study was completed into whenever that was, 2015, 2017, it was for 360 people maximum, but now we're looking at 810 people. And so
Was that people or cars?
that was people. And
Yeah, that's why we've asked them, there's certain flexibility built into the traffic, and that's what we wanted them to work on between now and the final.
yeah,
So there is
exactly.
some-
So 810 people, and they averaged 1.75 humans per vehicle. That's a lot of cars, and that blows away the parking. So just to, and then page 138, the handicap parking there's not enough handicap parking places. There was 2 mentioned. Page 141, who is financially responsible for bringing the depth of the water line up to what the guideline was? Page 147, I do agree with following the Colorado CPW, the wildlife species guidelines on the trees. And then page 153 has, the affordable housing has Willits Town Center met the 166.7 employee housing guidelines. And then finally, I really do agree with all of the recommendations from all the referral committees, including P&Z, the wildlife, all of it that's in there. And I would like to see all of those met and followed before final, or included in the final. Thanks.
Thorough.
Thorough.
I had one more thing that's sort of a high-level thing. I don't know what page it's really on. It's on my page 2. It's just basically saying the town wants to make sure there are appropriate restrictions to ensure TCA complies with Article blah, blah, blah of the PUD, and the center's primary focus is performing arts and not other activities such as rental for private parties which provide revenues. I would like to know, what does primary focus mean?
It means the focus is on a performing arts facility, and it's not like an event center.
Exactly how much is primary? I mean,
Yeah.
this is
And
not
that's-
very
I know.
clear.
Well, that's what we're saying that we need to have resolved before final. And we had discussions with this. I think they understand what our concern is. There's existing PUD language. I think they understand the concerns, and they'll come back with a response on that.
Because my feeling is that this would be a perfect venue for a wedding or a
Yes,
private
exactly.
event where they could get banged $5,000 an hour, so that we don't see in 10 years, yikes, we need another tax to support the operations of this place. I would rather we came down on the side of more liberally interpreting that, and that we allow them to do private events to as much of an extent as they can stand. That's my opinion.
That's a good comment. I do think that's worth a lot of discussion.
It is worth a lot of discussion, but the bottom line is, what will it hurt? Okay, that's all I want to know, what will it hurt? So when we have that discussion, let's have it, but Jen.
And then one final one from I just realized that I ran through the digital pages.
Yep.
And just as a reflection for future packets, is if the page numbers that are on the agenda item can be numbered so that you don't have to, so that if the paper had sequential numbers through the entire, I'll tell you later.
I understand what you want.
Okay.
I'm just like, we'll talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Auden?
There.
Oh. Auden? Bill?
I was just gonna move
Move it.
that we adopt resolution number 13, series of 2018.
Second.
Does that include Katie's amendment to have the applicant come back with a mass, address the permits for larger events?
Including Councilwoman Scheuer's proposal to address the congregation of greater numbers of individuals that may supersede whatever Eagle County's limits.
Second.
Okay. Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. right, so we do still have on our agenda, don't help me. Okay, Resolution 14, a resolution of the town approving the BPAC grant program.
Does he come up?
Hello
Hi again.
Where's your happy dance between items?
Always happy. Always.
Didn't see the dance, but okay.
You don't want to see that. They'd have me do that at the end of the night at the temporary, right before I move all the chairs again.
Oh, right.
They have me dance to get everybody to leave.
So, you got this one? Okay.
You're the only art guy with a Raytheon water bottle, by the way. Just saying.
I'm poor, so it was a gift.
So, good evening, everybody. This is the second discussion that we've had about BPAC's proposed granting program. As we discussed in the last hearing 2 weeks ago, BPAC's budget of $60,000 for 2018 is proposed to be spent through a grant program. These grants would range from $500 to $20,000. And these are from the discussions that BPAC's had. BPAC would like flexibility with what kind of grants to offer these toward. However, at our last hearing, we got some comments from you all that suggested maybe it would be better to put this money toward physical art. And so to that end, we've included some options in your packet. You have a resolution in your packet, and there are two options for the exhibits that would be, we'll call them bookends, you could call them policies for the grant program. And so the first option is pretty much what was presented 2 weeks ago. And the second option is a little bit more strictly based on the comments we received from you all. This might be a good opportunity to also talk about art and the economy that we heard a little bit about in Takah also. I don't think I can rattle it off, but Ryan Honey had some numbers about the impact of arts on the economy. And Susan and I also watched a webinar today about the impact of the arts in the local and national economy. So yeah, I included some numbers in the packet. I think $166 billion to the national economy per year. We actually heard some different numbers today from a study that were higher. $763 billion of economic impact total, that nationally. But even $13.7 billion in Colorado and 100,000 jobs. So however the data is sliced, whatever the differences come from, the arts are important to the economy and are important to people. I think we've seen that tonight. So I'll just highlight, if it's all right with y'all, the differences. They're kind of slight, but I'll just point out differences from the handout that we gave you at the last meeting, the bookends that we put in front of you. We have, in the packet in front of you tonight, we've recommended in the first option, I'm talking about the first option here, that recurring funding demands not be allowed for grants. That's just kind of a point of clarification, because obviously this is 1 year grant cycle that we're proposing and not a multi-year. We also included mention of the town's code of ethics that the selection committee for the grants would be subject to. I don't think that's really a substantial change, because we intended all along for this to be ethical, but we included that as a reference. We included a recommendation that the grant program could be reviewed by you all in a year. And as an option at the bottom of option 1, so an option to the option, you all could determine that not less than 67% of the grants shall be awarded for something other than physical art. So in other words, 67% should go toward physical art is the option to the option. And then again, so option 2, like I said, I think the big differences, and they are substantial differences, the option 2 would require all art to go toward physical art, and it would also not allow funds to go toward any member of BPAC. Members of BPAC, would you all like to add anything here?
Thanks, Watkins, and thanks, guys. I know it's a long night, and I appreciate you guys sticking it out with me. I was on a board meeting the other day that was about this long, and it was just about water and sewer. So I hope this is a little more interesting than water and sewer. And I know that there was a lot of discussion early, kind of whether we were going to talk about this tonight. So we're here. Let's talk about it. We've worked pretty hard to kind of try to figure out how this program could work and what the best way is to utilize the kind of funds that are available. And we firmly believe that this granting program is a good way to start. You know, as I say, you know, you have to learn to gestate before you can crawl. So we're kind of at that stage, and as we're at, not even our infancy yet, we need to kind of explore what the best way is to infuse money into the arts economy here in Basalt. And we think this is a good way to do that. It kind of gives us some flexibility. It really allows us to leverage your money, our money as a community, in a much larger way, because artists and arts organizations will come to us for grants, and we can then help them move forward with their project. And their project may come with additional money from elsewhere, and their project comes with staff that we don't have as a town. We just don't have the staff to kind of do this. A lot of other towns, as they kind of grow up their public art, have staff on board that kind of take care of that. So Carbondale's a good example of that when it comes to their sculpture. They have a staff member that helps them through that process. We don't have that. You guys don't have that yet, and maybe someday we will. So we see this as kind of a start, and we know we heard you. We hear the desire for public art, but I also kind of, we start to kind of weave these conversations together that we've seen tonight. You know, we've sat down with Post, and it's been a great. We've had a great collaboration, and we've helped them. They've helped us think about things, and I think that's been really good. But you see the controversy over just a bench. Imagine the controversy over a sculpture or things like that, and so while we understand your desire to have physical art, physical things in places, I think that needs to evolve over time, and that's how we feel as a board or as a commission to help to get to that point. And this is our first step. And the other thing is when we talk about how much money it takes to do that, it's very, very expensive to have art that's of quality. A good example is Carbondale's James Searles project. James is a world-renowned artist. He donated his time and the value of the piece, and the town paid for the materials. That was a mid-six figures project with just that, with the donation. So in thinking about putting in objects, there's a lot of cost to that. Second, on top of that, the arts community is really shifting right now. Things are moving more from physical objects to experiential art. We're seeing that more and more in museums. We only have to look to Meow Wolf, which is about to open a $30 million facility in Denver that is basically focused on experiential art. That's where the arts community is going. Those are the projects that are going to bring people to the community to come see. We can see what Breckenridge is doing. What they did, a light project, which is a kind of a week-long installation, and it was, you know, they hired artists to kind of do things on it. But that was do lighting on buildings and reimagine the space for a week, and they kind of went away. But that's a good example. But that's also a mid-six figures dollar kind of project. So we're kind of starting small here, guys, and that's what we're hoping with this project, is to start small. I understand your concern, and I think we'd like to get to that point. I think we're already working with staff as we do things like revisit East Valley Road and create opportunities for art to happen there in the future. But I think we're talking about this year and this year's granting process, and we think this is going to evolve. And we may decide as a group that next year there's other things that we're looking for as we're granting money. So that's what our thinking was, and I'm happy to sit down and talk with any one of you guys. You know, it's hard to have this conversation in this venue because we're just kind of, you know, you're there, I'm here. Let's sit across the table.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, let's sit across the table and talk about, we're here to help you guys make good decisions about the arts and the arts economy. And we, like I said, we have a board or a group that is you know, going to events to learn more about this, to kind of report back and give us, this is what other communities are doing. And that's, we were able to help post by just going to an arts organization event in Denver and saying, this is what other communities are doing when it comes to giving gardens, when you're having these same issues. So that's what we're here to help you. And we know that you guys don't have all the answers, but we don't have the answers. But let's sit down and chat about it. And I think that's really going to help us to kind of understand where you're coming from, where we're coming from, as we see what's happening in the arts economy and the arts community going forward. It's a lot different than it was 50 years ago. It's a lot different than it was 10 years ago, and it's changing. We can just see how people are experiencing are different. They're looking for those experiences. They're not looking to go look at a piece. They're looking to engage that piece. So that's what we're hoping with this granting process, is that we're going to have experiential things happening in the community, and that's our goal. So any questions, I'm happy to answer, or happy to stay on chat.
I have a question for staff really quick. Did we come up with the 1% number?
The
1%?
No, not the 1%. We don't know what the 1% number is at this moment, but that's not the pot of money.
I know,
this
but
is
we asked last time, and I
Jackie,
know we just still don't have a staff.
I'm sorry. Missy wanted to add something too. I didn't want to.
Yeah, I'm asking Ryan a question.
That's correct, and Lisa's first day back was today, so we can begin to track that.
Vacations.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we just need to know that sooner rather than later. Yeah, Missy.
That same webinar that several of us were listening to today, there was an incredible quote from the audience, and they said, any strategic plan for art is a terrible mistake. If you have any tendency towards being artistic, you know that it grows, it changes. When you have a strict vision, you really limit yourself. So BPAC is only 3 years old, and if you look at that, not in dog's age, but in human's age, we're babies, okay? And we're still learning, and we're learning with you guys. So we ask that you work with us and let us help you. We're thrilled to do so. I just took another 3-year term on BPAC because this is really an important issue, and it will make a huge difference to Basalt. But let's not have a defined picture of what we think it'll look like, because we will limit ourselves. So let's just let it grow and mature and see what happens. This is only for a year. If we don't like it, we can all do something about it next year. Thanks.
Okay, well, I'll just jump in there first. I have the same issues with this, with going forward on this as I had with the last citizen group, which is, I feel like we didn't give you direction of where to go. What our citizen groups traditionally have done is they are advisory and make recommendations, and they are not a granting organization in and of themselves. I think the thing that we are missing from the alternatives that we discussed at the last meeting was that this is not a granting organization, but this is an organization that comes to the council with recommendations for how we should spend the money on physical art. I heard a pretty clear majority, I thought, at the last meeting that wanted to see physical art on this. And I understand that that's kind of not where you were thinking, or not necessarily. It might be physical art, but it might be experiential art as well. But I think because we are new and we don't have much on the ground here, like say Carbondale or Aspen or Glenwood or anyone, that was my take on this deal. I would prefer not to land on one spot or another at this point, but I know that there are people here that do want to probably give you some pretty specific marching orders right now. So my feeling is we have an option 1 and option 2, but we don't have that option of, we want recommendations on how to spend $100,000, and we want it to be physical. That's what I want. But this is a 4-vote majority, so
So I had a good conversation with Jeff today, because I have been a proponent of physical art. I like what's happened in Carbondale, And it was pretty enlightening to me to think about, well, it's really expensive to get that to happen. You might get crappy art if you do something like I recommended, which is get donated art to try to bring the price down. And the other piece is that, you know, pulling that off is difficult. So my concern, you know, my desire for that was kind of assuaged a little bit. What I really want to do, though, is I know we have to sit down and figure out where these committees go, but this group has said, hey, we're going to help. They're volunteers. They're spending their time. They know more about this than I do. And so I want to support them by saying, hey, go forward with this as it stands, and we'll see how it evolves. Two things I think that needed to be addressed. One was this physical versus event. The other was this question of recusal. And I think if you have someone on the committee who is also applying, I think that's fine. And like all things, they recuse themselves from that decision. I don't think it's wrong for, say, TACA or Art-Based to apply because they're the right people to be doing this. They don't have to get the money. And as far as a granting organization, we're going to get that money. We're going to have to make that decision. They would make recommendations. So I would really like to see us move forward with this proposal tonight, and then in August we can have a conversation about the role. But to me, the role is advise us on art. We don't know, and that's what they're doing.
Thanks, Auden. Jim?
So to start, we are the responsible people, us 7, tonight 6, sitting at this table, responsible for how tax monies are dispersed. And the conversation has bounced around this evening, and there have been multiple implications that good art costs money. So why are we considering chopping $60,000, which is already described as a measly amount of money, but we were able to secure in Mocio, which we've had one opinion that it wasn't desirable, but for the general, it has been well received. So why are we considering chopping $60,000 into smaller bits? The second part is, from tonight's discussions, it has been clear that there's a little bit of cart before the horse situation. And if we are going to chop the $60,000 into smaller increments, we don't have a policy in place of what we do with this art and the policy around that. And that to me is concerning. And that circles back to my first point, that we are responsible for how these funds are spent. So it feels like the policy isn't meeting with what is proposed in front of us. Regarding the 2 options, I'm not going to go for either option 1 or 2. Neither of them, I feel, are the direction that I feel that this money can be spent, should be, and let's not talk about spending it, it's investing. So where and how we are going to invest it. And that's my comments.
Ryan?
Katie has her hand up,
Okay.
but I can go.
I just have a question. So it's June, it's almost July, and we're just getting this granting idea. Prior to this granting idea, what were you contemplating that you wanted to do with the $60,000 as a group?
We've been talking about this. We've been working towards this for the last 4 to 6 months. This is not just something we just started last week. We wanted to kind of work through this, how to set this up. We looked at other grants options. We looked out there how other ones are done. So we would meet. We meet every month. We get together. We started this process probably 8 months ago. Is that about right? 6 to 8 months ago. It takes a while to get this going, quite frankly. And so this is and get in front of you guys. You guys are busy. We get it. And we get it because we haven't heard from you guys. So we know that you're busy. You have other groups, other boards. You've talked about talking with Bose. We haven't seen you guys. So we know you're busy. We're busy too, and we were working through it. That's kind of the timeline it took to get to this point.
Okay.
And so it wasn't just on a whim, Katie.
Yeah, well, I know that, but I'm just wondering because the vision and what it had been 2 years prior is that this was spent on like an installation or
Understood.
something along those lines.
And
so I'm wondering.
It was a learning process from that. So we learned a lot. One of the things we learned is that Modio 2.0 took a lot of work. It took a lot of staff time took a lot of our volunteer time. And I don't think any of the other citizenry boards are out there kind of at that level. They're advising you guys. And we started to say, well, maybe we should be doing that too and advising you. We realized that there was a kind of a chunk of money Rita, that was set aside for the arts. Not necessarily public art, just the arts. That's how it's defined, I believe. And we said, well, maybe we should be advising you guys on how to spend that and spend that in the wisest way. It's not a lot of money. And so the question is, do you spend it all in one piece? Or do you chop it up? And do you do things that are gonna get you a return on your investment? And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about experiential art. One of the other things we learned at the Modio is, the cost of just getting the piece really hindered our ability to market the piece, get people here. There weren't a lot of people at the opening event, and it's hard to get people here if you don't have a marketing budget. So it just, when you get to physical, it gets really expensive really quickly, and then you own it. You got to keep it up. So Cloudgate, Millennial Bean is a good example. The annual budget to clean that piece of art is what we're talking about spending here. So at the same time, 4.75 million people go and visit that piece. So there's value to the city of Chicago to do that. The return is really good for them. We know we don't have that kind of money. We need to find other ways to get people here and engage in the arts community. And that's where this granting program comes up. And that's where the experiential thing gets people through the door. And like I said, if you guys aren't there, which I'm still trying to feel that, if you guys want to stay down and talk about this, because Jackie, you're very adamant about physical art, and I understand that. But I think we can talk through that and let you understand where we are and what we're seeing out there in other communities, and what do you really get when you get physical art, and what's the return on the investment, like Jen said, for that piece for the community. And we're trying to find, okay, we have this much money, how do we do that? Does that answer your question?
It does. And I mean, I just have more questions related
let's
to
sit down and
like
talk.
the relationship with Post and now their contemplation and their request for funds and how we're going to
Yeah, I think those are
integrate
parks and
these
open space
two.
funds, Katie. I think that's money
Right.
well spent from
But
the
my
$1.7 million
question
that come in
is
every year
how
for
these two
that.
committees
Let
are
Katie talk,
going
please.
to integrate and discuss the concept of art in public spaces in Basalt. So that would be one of my questions that I think we need to sort out. I know that Missy, I understand exactly what you're saying about the being strategic can kind of diminish the artistic spirit, but at the same time, I can't contemplate any other way except having a strategic plan, even if it really is just 12 to 36 months when it comes to BPAC. So, so there's that, and then just making sure that if we do continue forward with allowing TACA and the Art Base to apply for grants, if we go down the grant route, just making sure that it's really inclusive. Because my concern is just that if BPAC is dominated by members of these arts organizations, that people are gonna be intimidated or like, oh, I'm not even gonna apply. That money it's just gonna go to these groups. And I just really want fair, transparent, inclusive. That's what I want.
That's what we want too, above all. That's why we're here.
Okay, can I just say, I mean, I'm not sure how far we're gonna go with this. Somebody's gonna need to make a motion pretty soon. I know Ryan's got something to say, but I'm not gonna support this for the same reason that I didn't support the last one, not because of you guys and the work that you've done, because you're going down a road because you haven't had any direction. Once again, we have, like you said, you haven't heard from us. We have not given direction to our citizen committees for years. I hate to say that word, years. And I mean, whether it's the housing committee or the post committee or you, we haven't, and our charge, in my opinion, from having done this for a couple days, is to tell you what we want you to do. Otherwise, we get into this circular thing of Auden wants one thing and Bill wants something and somebody else wants something, and you're bringing us something to give you some feedback on, and it's, I think, coming from the wrong direction. It should be coming from us to our citizen groups to say, here's the clear parameters of what we would like for you to do to help us. So I'm in the same place I was on the last one. I think it's great that you're doing this work. We may end up on this. I don't know, we may end up doing this, but that's not where I am right now. Ryan has not spoken yet.
I want to thank you guys. I think you listened to us in the last meeting and you brought forward, I think, two very good options. One concerning just physical art, one concerning how to operate. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do this and make this happen. I know Bill has a comment, but you guys are trying to recommend something to us, which is what we asked you to do, and so I really appreciate that. And I hope we get a vote on one of these.
Thanks, Ryan. Bill?
I've got a couple thoughts on this, and I guess it does relate to what I believe the mandate and delegated authority of a committee should be. And I frankly would probably go in the other direction and delegate greater authority for the appropriation and expenditure of funds subject to a set of policies and guidelines that we would provide. And so here, Jeff, I would look to you and say, what can we delegate as town council in the authority of what would otherwise be called as the commitment or obligation of funds? I know they can't sign contracts, but can they commit to art? Now, I also do not see the distinction between the grant program that you have now and what was effectively a grant program for the procurement of Modio. It was a rental agreement, a contract of some sort, but you granted the money to the artist and they provided the artwork. This is no different. I do not think that we want to be the arbiters of what is aesthetic. Again, I would go back to you. You're appointed for a reason. You presumably have greater expertise, insight, and artistic appreciation than we do, and therefore, we as council members should delegate you the authority to express that artistic sensibility and either recommend and advise, or as I would go, commit and obligate funds for a specific period of time, like 1 year. That's the cycle that we're working with. But I think it's wrong for us to define or interpret what is artistic and what constitutes art. And this could be whether we're talking about figurative or physical art, or whether we're talking about performance, experiential, or any other kind of art. That is for you to determine. And for that very reason, I would resist any minimum expenditure on any form of art. There may be a very good reason to spend the full amount on some performance event, some musical or other form of art, and to limit you to 67% seems like a contrived and arbitrary figure, and I tend to resist arbitrary and capricious figures that unnecessarily restrict what we're doing. But I also find that according to Ordinance Number 3, Series of 216, we give you a lot of guidance, and it is sufficiently broad to permit a variety of different forms of art. So I don't know what more we would look for beyond the articulation of Ordinance Number 3, which gives you the latitude to make decisions based upon your best judgment. I do not think it would be at all wise to exclude any of our arts institutions that we fund and that we are proud of from applying for a grant. It is completely normal to expect that they will recuse themselves. That is to be expected. But you could make the argument that they should actually be given first priority. In the same way that we assign affordable housing to employees of Basalt, you can argue that to call the art space and other cultural institutions that we support should actually be at the top of the list. They should be more eligible than others, or that Basalt residents, or Eagle or Pitkin County residents. There should be parameters that do help guide you in your decision-making. And in the same way that I expressed my opinion with regard to Post, I would like to put the responsibility on you. We, the town council, is the legislature. We legislated in this ordinance and in the creation of BPAC, the creation of a committee. Legislatures don't typically draft implementing regulations. In this case, it would be the form of a policy. I would like to delegate and ask you to draft the policy defining how you will select art, how much you will spend, how you will adjudge the art, and present that to us for our review and approval. That way, it saves us the responsibility and the time of having to spend a lot of hours going back and forth when we are not arts experts. You are. You're going to better understand the policies, you better understand what other communities around our state and country are doing, and you better understand the artistic movements that are generating the most enthusiasm. I think it would be wrongheaded to try to replicate the trajectory of Carbondale. They've already established their sculptural franchise in the valley. Why do we want to become another Carbondale? Why would we continue to want to exist as kind of a lesser brother to Aspen? I would like to, again, ask you to define the artistic identity that will make Basalt a place that people want to visit, and whatever art form that happens to be, that we should leave to you, in my opinion.
Auden.
I would just make a motion to try to get us off the ball here, but we need Katie.
Mayor, if I may just follow up quickly.
Yeah.
Just a couple of points that you brought up. One, BPAC is not legally empowered to spend any money. They're an advisory committee. They can go through a review process by creating this program and review applications and make recommendations to council, but ultimately it's a council decision.
But is there not a distinction between the obligation or appropriation of $60,000 per year to them? We have already made the budgetary decision to, in federal procurement regs, obligate the money. Then it becomes the responsibility of the obligating or implementing agency to actually spend it.
Bill, just a second. I think he had a couple of things he was trying to say. Let's let him finish.
That's not how this is set up as
Okay.
an advisory committee. I understand what you're saying more broadly, but that's not how this is set up. And then I think there were also some questions and concerns about stewardship of public art once it's installed. And one of the options in the resolution.
Mike.
Yeah.
You just
bring
talk
it
closer.
closer.
Oh.
Just talk louder.
One of the options in the resolution includes any party that's going to be awarded grant funds to enter into a contract with the town, and that contract could spell out those issues as part of the grant approval process.
Brian?
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt resolution number 14, series 18, exhibit A, minus number 7.
So is that option one?
First option?
Option 1, sorry, exhibit A.
I would second.
I have a comment.
Further discussion.
Comment.
Auden, Katie, whichever.
I don't care.
Okay.
Mine's,
Well,
Go.
my comment is, I think we're maybe in danger of letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, and I think we do need to figure out what the committees do, and we do need to figure out exactly how we're guiding committees. But in this case, I feel like if we keep kicking the can down the road and not getting something done, we're not going to have people willing to serve on committees because they're going to get so frustrated by our lack of action. So it's not a ton of money. They've spent considerable thought, 8 months worth on this. I think it would be respectful to support this. And then, boy, by the time we figure this out, it's going to be 6 months down the road, and we can lay in our new program. So I support this motion.
Katie?
okay, so depending on where this motion goes, I think there's some conflict in the Exhibit A. So my question would be, that very first sentence, the BPAC grant process is approved by as substantially described by BPAC, and Exhibit B. Are we actually talking about attachment B?
Yes, it should be exhibit, yeah.
Okay, and then that attachment is actually in conflict in terms of what the grant does or supports or would support, with item number 2 where it says grants shall not be awarded for applicants with recurring funding demands, nor shall grants be awarded for general operating or living expenses. The same thing happens with the second Exhibit A, number 2. It's in conflict with attachment B, which says that the grants provide general operating and project support.
I saw that too.
So, depending on where this goes, we just have a lot of conflict between our exhibits and our attachments.
Any staff comment on that?
Sure. It's my understanding that in the Exhibit B, that's the described intent of the program as drafted by the BPAC, and the Exhibit A conditions would be it would be approved subject to that. So the conditions and modifications in Exhibit A would basically control or supersede those conflicting provisions.
But the Exhibit B is the attachment B.
Right, and I think the way it's worded is a little goofy, but we're approving this subject to 1, 2, and 3. So if 1, 2, and 3 are kind of override what that the Exhibit B outline is.
And if it
It's
made
fixed.
you feel more comfortable, we could just say what we normally do, which is in case of any conflicts with
Yeah.
Exhibit B, Exhibit A provisions prevail. It's not really necessary, but it would clarify that up.
But I
Just a
think,
second, Bill.
okay.
Okay?
But I think the purpose and intent, I would agree with Katie, is that Exhibit A rule and that funds not be used to support operating expense. That is our intent and purpose here.
Jennifer.
I'm really uncomfortable with granting money just because it's a respectful thing to do. There's no respect. I think that they should be defined different. We're not here to, we're here to be financially responsible for these taxpayer funds. And that's not related to giving it out due to respect or not. It's a separate thing. We're here to just make sure that it all lines out, it makes sense, and if we're going to bring respect into the conversation, there has been misuse in the past when I hear Bill talking about, well, we should just let any group manage the money and grant it as they will. There has been misuse of public funds, and that's where I come from a very protective look at this, as we need to be very diligent and ensure that this meets the standards and policies that we've set forth.
Mhm. As a public official for 20 years, I
Bill,
probably
could
know
I
a
just ask
fair
you to
amount.
please ask for the floor, because I think maybe even Ryan had
Sorry.
something.
No, I'm ready to vote.
All right, you just need to ask for the floor, please. I'm
Sorry.
respectfully requesting. Yes.
So to the point that both Auden and Jen are making, I am entirely conflicted about what to do, because we, as you've experienced, as a council, we need to get together and figure out the direction that we need to provide, or lack of direction that we need to provide to our citizens groups. At the same time, you have spent a lot of time working through this and contemplating what's the next step with BPAC and how to spend $60,000. I am really conflicted because I do want to respect your time, but I want a strategic, clear plan for us all to just be like, you come in 5 minutes and you're like, boom, 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 this is it. And we're like, we're all on the same page, boom, thank you so much. And you can go and move on and do wonderful things. That's what I want for all of us. And I don't know if voting yes gets that or voting no gets that.
Bill, then Ryan.
Okay. On the issue of procurement integrity and procurement oversight, I have seen a fair amount of it, and delegating authority to units that are appointed in a specified way. There is an appointment procedure for the appointment of BPAC committee members, and so delegating the authority for them to commit or identify uses of funds is what we should be doing. It's not our responsibility to identify all uses. We need to ensure that the procurement upholds procurement integrity at the federal, national, or local and state levels, and to ensure that we are protecting the fiduciary responsibilities. I'm totally with you on that, Jen, and I don't think we are misappropriating that responsibility by delegating the authority to them. I would also argue that, unless I'm mistaken, unless public art in ordinance number 3 is not a Basalt ordinance, we have already articulated what public art includes. We've defined it. So I don't find that this grant procedure is in any way in conflict with a statutory act that we have passed in our town. I also don't see that option 1, Exhibit A, fails to specify how the grants will be awarded, what the BPAC members are going to do, how the town attorney shall draft a form of contract I mean, I think the policy and the practice is articulated in this option one, what I would call a policy or a procedural statement. So I don't know what more we're looking for in the way of guidance to provide the BPAC members. This seems to do it, and we have the law that's now 2 years old that tells us what we can do. So why are we revisiting a law that we've already passed, would be my other question.
I'm just gonna say, we have, then I'll let you talk. We do have a motion and a second. Anyone on this council can call the question anytime they want to, and we will vote. Ryan?
I'll do that after the statement. And just, it still comes back to us if the grant gets approved on number 5. So I vote that we make the vote right now, because we could go around in a circle all night.
That's like
'Cause
calling the
there's obviously
question.
different
That's
people
right,
have different
that's right,
rooms,
that's
so we're
right.
here to vote.
All in favor of, was it your motion?
It's my motion.
Okay, all in favor of Ryan's motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay. Did we vote? Did you vote?
No, I'm totally conflicted about how to move forward in the most prudent way. So I'll.
Could abstain.
I know, right? No, but then I'll just nay for now.
Okay.
We need to collectively get together as a council so we don't ever have to go through
So
this
the
again.
only reason this failed is not because of the work you did, not because of the ideas you brought forth, but because we don't have a clear vision among ourselves of how we interact with our committees. And so, once again, I will say, this might have been an hour ago that I said this. We may end up with a granting program that you make recommendations on. But it isn't gonna happen tonight.
Well,
So-
I would encourage you guys to reach out to us and let's sit down and talk, Katie and Jen and Jackie. I think we can alleviate some of your concerns. I get it, we're not gonna get there tonight, that's fine. But I know you guys wanna kind of cloister yourselves and kind of figure it out. But I think it's important, I think like Auden learned today with the picking up the phone and calling, we've thought a lot about this. And so we wanna help you understand where we're coming from and why we have made these decisions. And it's hard for you to make those questions here, right now. I get it. Pick up the phone, give us a call, let's sit down and chat, let's talk through those concerns, and we can adjust this to make you guys work. I want a unanimous, and I want this, like you said, you want everybody to be happy, I get it.
We're gonna talk again, and it's gonna be a heck of a lot easier. In the
I hope it's not
meantime,
after August, though, I hope we're a little bit faster.
meantime, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm
Thanks.
sorry.
Thank you, guys.